Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff a little belatedly. Sorry we did not have a podcast in the last week. Really wanted to do it because we were going to talk about Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, which we are going to talk about today at length. We'll give a spoiler-free reaction in just a second. But as an explanation, you can probably hear in my voice I'm a little hoarse. That's because I had what I thought was a cold. Not a cold. It got much worse. And by the time we would have recorded the podcast, I basically couldn't talk because if I talked for more than like 5 words, I would go into a coughing fit like Walter White on Breaking Bad.
Good. I respect that you decided not to do the podcast under those conditions because I think it might have been slightly annoying for the audience.
By Wednesday, I had a fever of 102, so there were reasons not to record.
Yeah. You know, we have been weekly for a good long stretch here.
Yes.
We can take a break and not like fall back in, you know.
Yes.
We're not going to start using again and never like be on the podcast.
Yeah, and so we are going to talk about Uncharted 4 today, better late than never. Let's give our spoiler-free reaction. We always like to do this. And Sean, you actually already gave yours.
Yeah, I gave a very extensive spoiler-free reaction a couple of days ago.
Because you wrote a review for the site, which I thought was very good. And a lot of people thought it was good, I think.
Yeah.
We got some good comments on it.
Yes.
So, what were, just summarize really quick, your thoughts on Uncharted 4?
I think Uncharted 4 is an amazing game. Like, it's not just an amazing game, but it's a very interesting game in terms of I think it says about the AAA blockbuster landscape right now, in that Uncharted 4 is very much a sequel. It is a part of the Uncharted franchise. You're playing as Nathan Drake. You are going on crazy adventures, and crazy shit happens. But at the same time, it is a game that does not rely upon spectacle to make it function. It is a game that relies very heavily on very long, quiet sections of exploration and contemplation. And it is a game that is very much about you interacting with the story and interacting with these characters first and not interacting with the spectacle first. And I have some complex feelings about that in some ways, there's like something about the straightforward nature of the old Uncharted games that I kind of missed that Uncharted 4 doesn't really have. But on the other hand, like what Uncharted 4 does provide you is a very sort of unprecedented experience as a video game. And so it's a really remarkable piece of art.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I don't think I have those same reservations. Like, I recognize them.
Yeah.
But for me, this is easily the best Uncharted game. I think it's the best game Naughty Dog has ever made. I would put it above The Last of Us. I think it is the best game of this current generation. I think it's got the best graphics of any game ever. I think you could go on and on with the list of bests that this game has.
Yeah.
And what you've got is one of the greatest achievements in video game history to me. And if anything, I think some of the early critical reaction I've seen is it was all positive, but if anything, I thought it was a bit muted because I think what this game does, as you say, is so unprecedented in marrying this. I mean, it is, we've talked before when we did our Uncharted retrospective about that evolution from Uncharted 1, 2, 3 into The Last of Us, and even though The Last of Us is a very different game, Uncharted is deeply rooted in its DNA.
Yeah.
And The Last of Us is so deeply rooted in Uncharted 4's DNA, and it's Naughty Dog, I think, gradually from Uncharted 1 to now, recognizing that what they do best doesn't necessarily lie in what you see in the marketing. It's not... Even though they do the big set pieces better than anyone who has ever tried this in video games.
Definitely.
And frankly, sometimes in movies, that's not even what they do best in their own games.
Yeah.
And Uncharted 4 is this incredible piece of storytelling and character development and mood and atmosphere and tone. And I think as a conclusion to this franchise, it could not have been more emotionally affecting or satisfying or moving to me in any way, shape, or form. I think it's damn near a perfect game. And as you say, there are things where you look at it and think about it and you wonder, man, do I miss something from those other Uncharted games?
Yeah.
But then I think there were 3 of those.
Yeah.
As this being because this is, to me, it's like there's the Uncharted trilogy and then this is something else.
Yeah, and it is the conclusion to Uncharted, and I do really appreciate that it is definitely the end of that story. Like, you can't have an Uncharted 5, or if you do, it has to be like a weird anthology thing or something. But they also don't end the game in a very predictable way. Like,
no.
I don't think you could ever see how they're going to end the game coming before it happens.
No, it is 100% an ending, and again, the ball's on Naughty Dog to say, we have the most popular current PlayStation brand, and we're ending it.
Yeah.
And, maybe Sony will come back and do more, but they can't do more with Nathan Drake and these characters.
Yeah.
And, just perfect. So, amazing game. Cannot wait to talk about it in depth. And I'm sure plenty of other people have enjoyed it because it's a popular game.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, we will talk about that more in a little bit. Sean, why don't you start us off? You did play another game, though, and we actually got a request on Twitter for you to talk about this. So.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yes.
Which actually, I should mention that in that. I'm glad that you mentioned Twitter because this is something I was going to say, but I forgot to tell you to put on the timeline for our podcast. Is that I made a new Twitter account that I'm now going to dedicate myself to engage with Twitter in a way that I didn't before, and that Twitter account is at Sean the Chapman. So that's Chapman, Chapman for people, and Sean is properly spelled as Sean.
I will put it in the notes.
Yeah. So since I'm going to start doing more writing for the site, in that like Uncharted 4 was the first salvo of that, and I've started working on another essay that's sort of a follow-up to the review that is going more in depth on specifically like ludonarrative dissonance and the conversation around that facet of video games and how like maybe we can evolve that critical conversation. I've decided I should probably like make a Twitter account and like engage with the internet in a more active way than I have in the past few years.
I think that's good. And then we can say we now both have a Twitter account.
Yeah,
it's not all...
and then you can say, hey, we're not going to have a podcast this week, and then I can also say on Twitter, hey, we're not going to have a podcast this week.
And that's good. And I should say, just as we're doing Inside Baseball site stuff,
sure, yeah,
I have not written a ton for the site this year, but I am trying to get back into it.
Because we've both been busy with like post-graduation stuff, obviously. So that's. But for me, like that stuff's kind of settling in place in a way where I'm finding more time to do writing,
Yeah, me too. I have a bunch of stuff drafted, and I'm in the works on. I'm going to bring back the monthly 10, which is an old thing I did in writing.
That's where this podcast got its origin.
Became the podcast. Going to put it back in writing, and it might be more than monthly. I don't know if that's what I'll call it.
Right.
But I have a bunch of things like that where sometimes top 10 lists are just a fun, easy way to explore things that are on my mind. So I'm going to do that. For instance, if you're a fan of Breaking Bad, I just finished rewatching that whole series, and I'm finally going to do my top 10 episode rankings on that because I did that for Mad Men when that ended, and I never did it for Breaking Bad, and those two being the two AMC shows that matter. That I'm not doing the top 10 Walking Dead episodes. Sorry.
Yeah, no. There's fucking must be billions of those articles on the internet. You don't need to write one.
And I think they're all like, this episode is mostly bad, but I like this one thing in it, which is basically what I
But
all I
this one
hear.
girl with the katana kills some zombies, so it's the best episode.
Yes. Anyway, there's other stuff. That one's not particularly timely. I'm working on other timely stuff, like ranking the Star Trek movies, because we've got a new Star Trek movie coming out. More on that later.
Yeah.
But Sean, you played Doom.
Yes, I played the Doom, or just Doom. I wish they had titled it The Doom, because it's something where, both with this and the new Ghostbusters movie, it's really frustrating when you're looking something up online, and I'm like trying to find, it's like, where the fuck is this secret in this level of Doom? And I type in Doom secrets, and then it brings up a bunch of stuff about how to find secrets in the original Doom. And it's like, that's like Doom 2016 secrets on level 2 or something.
Yeah.
I've been playing the new Doom game after I played the beta and had fairly positive reactions, more positive reactions of that multiplayer beta than most people had. I was sort of not entirely shocked by the other people's reactions to the multiplayer beta, because I think everyone was looking for the Doom multiplayer to be like what old Doom multiplayer was, and this game is not interested in offering that on the multiplayer side, because the first-person shooter multiplayer has gone so far away from Doom and Quake and that model. But coming out of having positive feelings about the multiplayer beta and then just seeing the insanely positive buzz about the single-player campaign, I decided to jump in and just basically get it right away after I finished Uncharted 4. And so now I'm probably like 6 to 7 levels in. I'm playing on Ultra Violence, which is like heroic. It's to use the Halo metaphor. It's the like one up from the normal difficulty, because that's how I played original Doom. And like all the praise about that game is 100% on point. It is easily the best first-person shooter campaign I have played in years and years. It is an incredible achievement, both in terms of just like raw video game design, in the ways that it feels 100% like a Doom game made in 2016 in the mold of what Doom 1 and Doom 2 were, but then also really pushing that envelope in terms of like adding on double jump stuff that allows you to maneuver around the environment in a really dynamic way, and giving all these different ways for you to gain health back by performing these execution attacks on enemies. That has this incredibly energetic pace to the combat where you just get desperate for health, and to get health back, you either need to find a health pack in the like combat arena you're in, or if you kind of do enough damage to stun an enemy, you can get up on them and do these glory kills, which are the canned animation melee kills that you've seen in all the trailers and stuff. And they serve a really precious function because you need to get health all the time, and your health is just going up and down constantly in fights, and you're always on the verge of just getting completely eviscerated by a cacodemon or something like that. And it just has that ferocious, brutal quality that Doom needs to have. The music is ridiculously over-the-top, super cheesy metal, which is what it needs to be. And it's mixed really in well with the level, because also the levels are designed in that sort of labyrinthine way that original Doom was. And so there's a lot of backtracking and finding red keys or blue keys or yellow keys and opening doors and finding secrets. So a lot of the pace of the game is you going into this arena, getting thrust in this massive fucking fight with all these demons jumping in all over the place, and then the music just goes to this screeching wail as you are just like thumping, like just beating these demons to death and firing your shotgun, and the weapons and the sound effects all feel like they congeal with the background music to like create this like just incredible concussive music that then once you finally kill everything, there's like a final guitar like that plays, and then the music sort of fades into the background as you go to like scavenge the battlefield to get health and to like find the secrets that are in the area. And it's just incredible to me that you could make a Doom game in 2016 that feels like it is Doom, but also feels like it takes the best parts of where the first-person shooter genre has evolved over the years and even pushes it further from the mold that Doom originally had. And so, like, if you are someone who's a huge fan of the original Doom, this is an absolute must-play. And if you're also someone who's a fan of that kind of first-person shooter that has a campaign that is built around levels, but those levels are meant to be explored and really enjoyed in that way, and not just sort of march through in the way that the Call of Duty levels are. Like this game is a return to form for that kind of first-person shooter that we haven't seen in a very long time, and so I'm very happy with it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I'm still not sure if I'm going to play it.
Yeah,
it might be something I wait for a sale on because my general antipathy towards most first-person shooters. At this point,
it's a very different kind of first-person shooter.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It sounds like it's good enough that I might enjoy it.
Yeah. I really just want to play it right now, so we should finish the podcast as quickly as possible.
Okay.
God damn it! Like I just need that blood and that. Oh, and that's another thing I should say, that the game has a story. And it's actually fucking hilarious because the game just feels like it is a satire of first-person shooters, in that the whole concept of the game is miraculously enough almost sort of a continuation of Doom 1 and Doom 2, where the opening of the game is maybe one of the best first 10 minutes in any video game ever, where you hear this like crazy narration where some like lady talks to you about like you will rip and tear and like all this stuff, and then you wake up as the stone sarcophagus lifts off of Doom Guy because you are the Doom Marine from Doom 1 and 2. You are the same character, and you get up and you grab a pistol and you fucking kill all these demons in your room, and then you see a hologram that shows like this recording of all these people praying at the stone sarcophagus with like pentagrams and stuff drawn on it, which is where you were entombed as the Doom Marine at the end of Doom 2. So there are like people on Mars have been worshipping you as they've been conducting these big like hell experiments, and then you walk outside and you see the Doom guy's armor is also enshrined, and like you put it on, and then this guy talks to you that's like your Atlas from BioShock kind of figure, the guy who just like talks to you and gives you your mission objectives, and he's telling you all this shit, and you just like take the comm screen that he's talking to you through and you just throw it against the wall. You walk out and you kill a bunch more demons, and then you go into an elevator, and as you're going up the elevator, the guy starts talking to you again. He says, and it's this like Optimus Prime sounding guy just going like, "You don't understand. What we did was for the good of humanity." And then Doom Guy just looks down at like this just like charred and disemboweled corpse at his feet, and then he just like punches the elevator button, and then it smashes to a late title screen that just says Doom as guitar starts wailing. It's just like jug 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 jug, and then the doors open up on the elevator as you see like Mars in fire in front of you, and then you pick up a shotgun and cock the shotgun in time with the last beat of the music, and that is how the game opens.
All right, you sold me. I gotta play.
So fucking good, and all of the story content in the game is of that style, hell where, like, you are just this unstoppable juggernaut that goes through and just weighs lace to everything. Like, when you go to hell, you find, like, basically hell audio logs that are these tombs that with, like, these, like, pedestals that, like, talk in this demon voice about, like, this guy that's obviously the Doomslayer, as the demons call you, who went through hell, like, 20 years ago and weighed lace to you, to the demons, and how the demons are afraid of you. It's the most extreme power fantasy. And there's another level later on where the guy, the Optimus Prime sounding dude, is talking to you about, like, you have to, like, take these, like, disable these things that are sort of powering this portal to hell. And the guy said, it's like, okay, now you have to be incredibly careful and remove this thing and remove the second and fourth lens, and you just smash it and explode it. And it's like, no, what are you doing? Like, you can't, we need this to generate our hell energy. It's like, we've solved, like, an unlimited energy source, and you just go through that level and just blow up all of them as this guy is, like, desperately, he's like, no, stop, like, just disable it and we can fix it. And you just fucking stamp on it and smash it into pieces. It's so good. It's such a good game, Jonathan.
Okay, I'm excited now.
Yeah.
I'm excited now.
God damn it, Doom's really good.
Nice. And so I was never really into Doom.
Yeah.
The original games. Does that matter?
No. Like there's I think more enjoyment as you get to see, like, oh, what does the Cacodemon look like in this game? What is, like, when you find a Mancubus, what does the Mancubus look like? And there's some funny references in, like, little text logs that you can find that, like, are amusing if you've played Doom and are familiar with it. But I think you can absolutely enjoy the game for what it is, as, like, this callback to evolution to an older style of first-person shooter that is just a, like, remarkably well-designed game. And then also the story stuff, I think the satire element of it works whether you've played Doom or not.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will pick this up. I will try to play this. Don't know when I'll have time.
Yeah.
June is a busy fucking month for games.
Yeah.
A lot coming out.
It has been a good year so far for games. Like, as good as 2015 was, 2016 is fucking starting off really well.
But I feel like 2015 was good in certain pockets.
Sure.
It wasn't. I don't think it had it had depth, but not breadth.
Sure.
This is a year with both.
Yeah,
this is a year with a crazy amount of depth and breadth in quality of games.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're really only just getting started.
Yeah.
Uncharted 4 was kind of the beginning of, like, crazy time.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Well, I will play Doom at some point, and maybe we can talk more about it.
Yeah, I'll definitely, because I should probably finish it by the time we do next podcast.
Okay.
So I'll give my wrap-up thoughts then.
I heard it's about a 15-hour campaign or so.
That sounds about right, yeah.
Okay. Cool. We got a couple 15-hour campaigns, because Uncharted 4 also unexpectedly long.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, cool. Let's go ahead and do a couple pieces of news and things. Going to start with, this is the 20th anniversary of Pokemon. A couple weeks ago, we did our Pokemon retrospective, which was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it.
And, I did a thing where I got OCD and ranked all the starter Pokemon.
Yeah, because you're a silly person.
I am a silly person, but it made for a fun discussion.
Yeah.
And they have announced more details about Pokemon Sun and Moon, which are the 3DS games coming out this November now. I think they have dates.
Yeah, that sounds right.
They did announce dates way ahead of time. So anyway, we've got those, but that'll be coming out at the end of the year, maybe the last big game for the 3DS, we will see. But they announced with this the starter Pokemon for the new region, which is a Hawaii-inspired region, which is kind of cool.
Sure.
So let's talk about the new starters, Sean.
Okay.
I'll show you pictures.
Yes.
You give me some reactions. We've got Rowlet, the grass starter. He/she, little guy, is a grass quill Pokemon inspired by an owl. So that's Rowlet.
Yep.
He seems to be the fan favorite so far.
I mean, he's cute. It's a cute design. It's cute. Yeah. It looks like an owl, and it just kind of looks like an owl, but that's fine.
Yeah, I like it just fine. I like that it's got, like, a leaf bow tie.
Yeah.
That's okay. All right, good. Then we've got Litten, which is the fire Pokemon. It is a cat. It breathes fire hairballs, which is a little gross.
Yeah.
But there you go. That's Litten.
Yeah, like, honestly, Litten does not, I think, carry its weight as a starter Pokemon.
No.
That looks like that's like the Rattata of that game, you know?
I agree. Like, it's not a bad Pokemon design, but as a starter, I agree. It seems like what you would see right outside your starter town.
Also, Litten that sounds like something that Geralt would be killing, like hunting. It looks like a Litten has been through this area.
Well, we'll see in Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Maybe you'll be hunting the Littens.
Yes. And then finally we have, I think, an unfairly maligned starter Pokemon. We have Poplio, who is a sea lion Pokemon who's also a clown, and that's Poplio.
Yeah.
I will be using Poplio. I like Poplio. I think Poplio is cool. No one else does. Makes me sad. Everyone's making fun of poor Poplio online. I don't think he deserves it.
I mean, maybe he does deserve... Maybe, Jonathan, and this may come as a supreme shock to you, but you might just not actually be the arbiter of everything cool that you think you are.
I don't think I'm the arbiter of everything cool.
Well, then why do you think that people are wrong to think that Poplio is cool when you think he's cool?
Why do you think he's lame?
He's a water-type sea lion clown-looking thing. I think for me the biggest issue with these 3 starter Pokemon is that it's an owl, a cat, and a sea lion, and that is it. It's an owl with a green thing on it. It is a cat that has some red fur, and it is a blue sea lion, and that is the entirety of what they are.
I agree, and keeping in mind that beggars can't be choosers on this shit, that I think Poplio has the most personality of the 3.
I don't know. The owl's the cutest and has a little green
I guess the owl's the cutest. I feel like
also, he's the grass-type Pokemon, and that's always, that's a bad road to walk, is the picking the grass starter. That's just, the hard mode for Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's just, it highlights how little that Pokemon can innovate, because I don't even know if it's not fair to make fun of Pokemon for not being able to come up with good new starters, because there's 800 Pokemon at this point. How are they ever going to it's always been a downhill trend because they fucking knocked it out of the park with the first 151. There's a couple of Mr. Mimes and Jinxes in there that aren't the most amazing Pokemon, but in general the first 151 pretty solid Pokemon we can all agree are really cool. And then after that, it's you get a dozen cool Pokemon in the next 100. It's then you get 8 cool Pokemon in the next 100. Then you get 1 cool Pokemon in the next 100, and then they stopped making cool Pokemon past that point because there's only so many that you can design. That's why Digimon is great, because they just get to pick and choose from this huge history that franchise has, and the games don't carry the burden of having to make new Digimon. All the shows have to do that, and so the trading cards and all that shit, and the games just get to be Agumon and all these different Greymons and all these guys in Terriermon, they're all awesome, so we'll just put them in our game, and we'll leave all the crappy Digimon that no one cares about, and we don't have to put them in the game. Pokemon doesn't have that courtesy. They have to just keep on charging forward, making crappy new owls and cats and sea lions because there's nothing else you can do anymore.
I was a little surprised. I mean, you were surprised by how cool some of the starter Pokemon were in the most recent generation when I showed them to you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I didn't think they were great, but they were better than,
Poplio.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
I mean, would Pokemon be better off just picking some best of for your starters and then just, have a new region but not focus on all new Pokemon?
Probably, honestly, because there are so many Pokemon that, I would not be able to tell. If I decided to get in and get Sun and Moon and buy a 3DS, you could completely populate the game with Pokemon that are outside of the first 2 generations, and I would not be able to tell most of them whether or not they were made for the game or not. And I think most people playing Pokemon are going to be like that. Most kids playing Pokemon today are not going to know the first, 300 Pokemon that well unless they've been reused in the other games. They're all going to know Pikachu and Charmander and Squirtle and Bulbasaur because they're all going to advertising.
Let's be honest. They're going to know Geodude.
Yes, and they're going... I mean, because we all know... We come out of the womb knowing about Geodude. We're warned about him and Zubat at birth. But yeah, other than that, they're not all going to know about, Scyther. They're not all going to know about Lapras. They're not going to know about all those, like Ninetales and Arcanine, the cool, awesome Pokemon that are in the 151... that aren't necessarily the marquee ones that you put in Pokken tournament or you put in all your advertising all over the place.
Right.
So I think you absolutely can and should populate a lot of your Pokemon game with those other Pokemon from the past instead of there's no point in making another Rattata every single year. Just cycle through. It's this year we're going to do Rattata, next year we'll do Zigzagoon, and then we'll move on to whatever the next one is and the next one is. We don't need to make new ones. We just filter through the 8 we already made each successive game, and it'll never feel old.
It's definitely... They could do a roster. If, let's say, they wanted to just put 300 Pokemon in the game, they could pick a best of where it was 300 solid hitters.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, every Digimon in that game is a hitter.
Yeah.
Because they picked just the best of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's in a weird place as a franchise.
It's in a weird place, yeah.
It's like the further they get, the harder it is for them to stay the same without changing dramatically what they are. And it's like they've been making baby steps, certainly, but it's like it's still you look at some of the stuff for Pokemon Sun and Moon, it's like, man, Pokemon, you can't do this forever. Like, eventually it's not going to work. Eventually you have to evolve or die.
We'll see. X and Y were really, really good. I'm really curious to see if Sun and Moon will just be X and Y 2, or if they will be more. This is kind of weird when we're having another one on the same generation. Right, I guess that technically happened on DS where we had Diamond and Pearl and Black and White.
I mean, that happened with the Game Boy Color also.
But the originals were technically for the original Game Boy.
Sure, but like Game Boy Color is like more or less the same machine. I mean, they're not the same machine, but the same generation.
But Gold and Silver is really different in a lot of ways. They added a lot of stuff. Yeah. I should say, I got nostalgic, and I found my Game Boy Advance SP, and I wanted to play Gold and Silver again, because I love those games. And I put in my cartridge for Gold. The battery's dead in that one. No, so you can save, but the time stuff doesn't work.
Right.
And then I tried Pokemon Crystal, which I also have, and it seemed to be working better. And I played like an hour last night, and then I started again this morning, and the battery, something's wrong with it where it will not advance when it's off. Oh. So if I would just be in nighttime all the time, and I would only see Hoot Hoots. And I like Hoot Hoot, but you need to be able to do the cycle. I will go to the mat for Gold and Silver. I think those are fucking great games.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that they're not great games. I'm just going to say that, like Red and Blue are Red and Blue. Okay. I should say, I haven't checked my Red cartridge recently, but a couple of years ago, I did replay through all of Red, knowing that it might be the last time I can on that cartridge. So, like, whether or not it's dead or not, I feel like I said my goodbyes.
Well, the save battery isn't necessarily the problem. Yeah. So Red and Blue, like my Red cartridge is just fine.
Yeah.
For this, it was the battery that did the day-night stuff in Gold and Silver.
But those Game Boy cartridges, their days are numbered. Like this, they don't last forever.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, now they've re-released Red, Blue, and Yellow on 3DS, and I'm glad because they're archived. I really want them to do that for Gold and Silver because I like those games better. I'd like to play them again, and they have not come out that way. And Heart Gold, just the graphics look more dated for that than they do for the original Game Boy stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Game Boy graphics, they age, but in a very different way.
Yeah, but the original Gold and Silver, you don't get like this stupid thing that you can walk around with.
The Pokewalker?
Yeah, the pedometer. Yeah. Like that makes or breaks Pokemon for me, Jonathan.
All right, speaking of video games, Witcher 3 finally announced kind of the best kept secret, the worst kept secret, that their final expansion, Blood and Wine, is coming out at the end of the month, May 31st.
Yep.
And it'll be $20, which seems like an absolute steal for what they're giving you, which is a whole new continent, a minimum 20-hour campaign, etc., etc. Sean, are you excited for The Witcher 3?
I'm so excited. Like, I've been reading through the books, and I'm halfway through the book, the fourth novel. That's not the short story collections, which is the one they just translated and released, so I'm going to be almost caught up. And then I'm going to have to wait for them. I'm going to either have to find a fan translation of the last novel or wait like a year for them to release the last novel. So, like, while reading through those, I've been sort of... Before Uncharted 4 came out, I sort of made a new Witcher 3 game and was just sort of poking around in it and just having fun with that because I couldn't wait long enough for Blood and Wine. Because Hearts of Stone, the last expansion they had, which was a smaller scale than what Blood and Wine is going to be, is some of the best stuff in that whole game. Like, it's one of the best, if not maybe the best, like, DLC I've ever played. And so the idea of that quality, hopefully, with, like, even more expanded with an entire new continent and everything of Toussaint, like, that sounds fucking amazing. And all the trailers they've released, because they've released a couple now with that date, just look amazing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm very excited for that game.
We'll get to have Witcher 3 on our top 10 again.
Exactly, yeah. Like, I'm glad that it seems like Blood and Wine is going to be expansive enough that I'll have no qualms about, like, putting it on a top 10 list at the end of the year and not have to be like it's really good, but, like, it takes place on the same map. Does it qualify to be in the discussion with this other stuff? That seems like it's not going to be an issue with this.
No, this will be like, like you put Last of Us Left Behind on your top 10 one year. And if that can qualify, I think this could.
Yes.
So I am definitely excited. And it's $20, which is a steal. And on PlayStation, at least, for pre-order, it's $17.99.
Yeah.
It's got a discount. So they're just fucking giving it away. I mean, that is so cheap for this kind of thing. If you look at, Far Harbor on Fallout 4, isn't that like a $40 thing or something?
I think it's something like that.
Yeah. Which I'm sure it's going to be cool and worth it in some way. But The Witcher, they are nice about their prices.
Yeah, no, definitely. They've always been very fair with that stuff.
Yeah, so that's exciting. That'll be the end of the month. I still have not played Hearts of Stone. Got to catch up on it.
Yeah. Then plus, it'll, like, Blood and Wine coming out will give us an opportunity to do our full Witcher 3 podcast, which we haven't been able to do.
Haven't done that
since
yet.
you played the game late because you were stupid.
I was stupid. I should have played it earlier.
Yeah.
It's too bad. I had a busy 2015. All right, so let's see what else. Couple of movie trailers, and then a little bit of movie news.
Yeah.
First trailer, I'm going to go with the easier one to pick apart first.
Okay.
So we're going to go backwards chronologically.
Okay.
Last night, we're recording this on a Saturday, they released the new trailer for Star Trek Beyond. Kind of a strange thing with Star Trek Beyond is that they've only had that one teaser so far, even though the movie's coming out in July. Like,
is that soon? Yeah. I didn't even realize that.
There's been no marketing for this movie.
Yeah, that's really weird.
And I think there's a reason they don't know how to market it.
No, because this is another in a recent trend of the second trailer looks like it is advertising a 100% different movie than what the first trailer was selling.
But this trailer is like 3 different trailers. It's like a 3-minute trailer, and each minute is a different movie.
Yeah.
And I should say up front, I'm excited for this movie.
Yeah, me too.
I like Star Trek to begin with. I love this cast. I like Justin Lin as a director. Simon Pegg wrote the damn thing. I'm on board. The trailers for me do not affect my excitement one way or another.
Right.
But like that first trailer was a mess.
Yeah.
And this trailer, honestly, I think is even messier because at least the first trailer was like on message, which is fun, action, exciting.
Yeah, and it all seemed to revolve around them being on that one planet from that first trailer. That there's like 5 seconds of footage of in this trailer.
Yeah. This trailer is like, I'm not sure what they're pitching. Like, is the first hour just Kirk in a bar on Earth?
Yeah, just like all the cast just hanging out on Earth doing something, I don't know, like, and then using that shot from the original Star Trek trailer of him, like, in Kansas or whatever, looking at the Enterprise being built. I just thought that was weird that they reused that shot in that trailer.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and then they're in space and they're fighting a bunch of robots, and then for a little bit they're on that planet with, like, the more primitive-looking race using, like, big axes and stuff like that. That's from the first trailer. And that's it. It's just like, how do all those things interconnect? Like, if there's not a good sense of, like, what the plot for the movie is at all. Like, there's, like, and not even just, like, what is the premise of the movie, I should say. Like, you don't get an idea of what it is.
No, because that first trailer, I think we all made fun of it. It seemed a little goofy.
Yeah.
But it seemed like, okay, they're on their 5-year mission. Something goes wrong. They're on a planet. And I liked that because it felt like just a big episode of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Which is really all I want.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more like Kirk's sad, and then they go back into space. I don't know why they were on Earth in the first place.
Yeah, like if you're looking at this trailer, I think there is no impression you get that they are on their 5-year mission, and that's what this is like. This looks like Star Trek 3. Like, it looks like it is the next, like, big blockbuster, sort of like, like that shot of, like, all the robot things, like, hitting the Enterprise and all that. Like, that doesn't look like something that happens on your 5-year mission. That looks like when, like, the Borg are invading Earth or something. That's when that happens.
Yeah, so it seemed weird. There's some nice moments with the cast. And
yeah, there's a lot more McCoy in there, which makes me very happy because he was criminally underused in the first 2 Star Trek movies.
More in the second. He's
in it more. He should be in it all the time, is what I'm saying. That's what I mean when criminally underused.
He is. Carl Urban is great. Carl Urban, he's was just cast in Thor 3.
Yeah. Along with Jeff Goldblum playing, like, the Game Master, like, whatever that character's name is, who's, like, this, like, omnipotent being. It's, like, the perfect casting for fucking Jeff Goldblum.
Yes. Well, that'll be next year, but Thor 3 got a good cast.
Yes.
Anyway, even if poor Natalie Portman is not returning.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm calling her poor. She's
doing successful. Fine for herself,
yes. Fine enough that she doesn't have to fulfill her Marvel contract. Yeah. Anyway, let's see. So yeah, that's Star Trek Beyond. I don't even really know what to say. It's kind of just nothing as a trailer.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's just one of those trailers. Like it's like the movie like looks fine in terms of, it seems like the action scenes look cool. Like it's shot well. Like, you don't get a sense of, like, it's going to be a poorly made movie from the trailer or anything like that. It's just a trailer that doesn't give you a strong impression of the film at all. It doesn't feel like it is marketing an idea for the movie.
No, and I do think, we talk about trailers on here, and we frequently talk about Marvel trailers because there's a lot of Marvel movies.
Yeah, and they're generally really well done.
They have a sense of what their movies are. Like, whether you like their movies or not, and they've had good movies and less good movies, the trailers are confident in what they are marketing.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're marketing a different... Like, the Thor the Dark World trailers do not give you a sense of what that movie is.
No, yeah.
But I think they marketed it just fine.
Yeah.
And...
Because I also don't know how you market how goofy Thor the Dark World ultimately was.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't spoil that he hangs his
I would have thrown my popcorn at the screen if they had spoiled that moment.
Indeed. But I think, like, outside of that Marvel model, most blockbuster movie trailers, I feel like people, like, don't know how to market movies anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just, like, again, people talk about being excited about Suicide Squad, and I'm like, I don't know why from those trailers, because they give you no indication of what the movie will actually be to me.
It's just, and it's something where it feels like movies usually don't do this thing that a lot of trailers are doing now, where, like, one trailer will market, like, a specific idea for the movie, like Star Trek Beyond or Batman v Superman had it, Suicide Squad had it. It's like one trailer will be, like, very solemn or something, and the next trailer is just crazy action, and it's, like, super saturated and all this stuff, and, like, really quickly edited. Like, how are you, like, this just makes, because as soon as you do that, I feel like my impression of the movie is completely destroyed. Because, like, this information I had, like, in my subconscious about, oh yeah, that's, like, my general impression of what this movie's, like, tone or something is going to be, is, like, now it's just, like, being overwritten, but, like, they're just incompatible, so they almost, like, neutralize each other. And so it's just, like, I feel like it exposes how little you can trust the marketing around the movie, and so you can't even, like, get hyped up or excited for the film because it's just, you have no conception of what it's actually going to end up being.
Speaking of which,
yeah,
we finally have the trailer for the Assassin's Creed movie. It is real. I really wouldn't have believed it until we saw footage.
Yeah, like it is actually definitely happening. Like Michael Fassbender was definitely cosplaying as an assassin. Like, yes. I'm hoping he will be up on stage at Ubisoft's E3 press conference in a couple of weeks here and like you know, shooting the shit with Aisha Tyler or something.
That would be fucking great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. He's not going to be there.
No.
Let's not give ourselves. They can get Pele. They can't get Michael Fassbender.
No, I think Michael Fassbender, when he's not acting, like, goes into a cave or something.
Probably,
he's one of those actors.
He just meditates.
He goes to wherever Viggo Mortensen goes.
Exactly, yeah. I actually like to think that, like, they're just, like, sitting around a campfire in the middle of the wilderness, like, sharing stories. Like, him, Viggo Mortensen, and Daniel Day-Lewis all together.
Yes, I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
All right, but we've got the Assassin's Creed trailer starring Michael Fassbender, Marion Cotillard.
Yeah.
Lots of good people, directed by an indie director named Justin Kurzel, who recently did a version of Macbeth with those two actors.
So, which is like, that's a really big swing going from I'm making this weird indie like Shakespeare movie to I'm adapting Assassin's Creed for movies. Like, pretty polar opposite.
Pretty polar opposites, but this is also kind of the most prestige that has been thrown behind a video game movie.
I don't know. The Angry Birds movie just dropped. I'm sure it's a true work of masterful art.
It's making $40 million this weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I thought we were done with Angry Birds.
We'll never be done with Angry Birds. You'll be done with Angry Birds when Angry Birds is done with you, Jonathan.
Anyway, talk about bad trailers. Good God, bad Angry Birds marketing.
No, well, it's behind us now.
It is. Anyway, what we were talking about Assassin's Creed, almost certainly going to be a better movie than Angry Birds. But
one would hope, certainly.
But will it be a good movie? I mean, this trailer, what does it say to you?
It says to me that, like, if I'm someone who has played a lot of Assassin's Creed and has very complicated feelings on that franchise, when you make a movie that hews so closely to the aesthetic of the game that it's kind of hard for me to tell whether I'm looking at a really, like a pre-rendered cutscene from the beginning of Assassin's Creed 2, or I'm looking at your movie trailer. I have very complicated feelings about your movie that, like, all of a sudden it takes on this, like, life with the games. That's, like, normally I'm someone who would advocate for, like, a video game movie to, you know, hew closely to the source material in terms of, like, aesthetic and stuff to, you know, to honor it well. But at the same time, there's something about it that is like, man, like, those Assassin's Creed costumes and stuff look really good in games, but, like, when I made that joke about Michael Fassbender looking like he's cosplaying as an assassin, I wasn't just making a goof. Like, it really does look like that to me, because those outfits look way too designed for, like, live action, if you know what I mean. Like, it's like no person would ever wear that in real life, and it works in the video game because it's naturally stylized, because it's all animated. It's like hand created. It has to be. It's like in live action, it's just like it doesn't mesh well. Along with, like, they're very CG Spain, because the whole the premise of the thing is that the Spanish Inquisition is his past character, and so like that like very otherworldly feel that they give to the past because it's obviously a CG recreation of like 16th century Spain or whatever. Like that, like it feels weird, and it made me almost like weirdly uncomfortable looking at the trailer because it just didn't look right.
It is this is an interesting moment because, as I said, this is the first video game movie to have real prestige behind it, and to have. It seems like people who have played the game. No, I mean, not just seems. They clearly have. The big moment in the trailer is the jump.
Yeah, which I'm so annoyed that they didn't, like, he jumps off the thing and then it smashes to, like, coming, like, April, blah, 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 or whatever. It's like, and, like, shows all, like, the studio logos. And then, like, it just, like, cuts to the camera shot, like, a wide shot on the ground with, like, the fucking, the cart full of hay in the middle. And then Mike Fassbender is like, and just crashing into the hay and then, like, smashes to the end of the trailer.
I thought what you were going to say is it would cut and he would be, like, poking his head out of the hay.
Yeah,
like,
or the afterwards. Do that too, yeah.
Like he'd be getting out. No.
And just, like, sort of, like, looking around and, like, starting to get out. Yeah.
I mean, I do think that's a really cool shot in the trailer.
It's a cool shot, but it does make one wonder, like...
Are they going to do hay or...
Yeah, it's like, because of all the things about this style of Assassin's Creed that is not going to translate to live action, like... It's already completely ridiculous that they haven't, like, figured out a better way to do that in the games. There's fucking no way that you can sell that in a movie that someone's going to jump off this giant cathedral into this barrel of hay that is, like, magically just, like, in the middle of the road for no reason whatsoever. That, like, someone just leaves their hay lying around in the middle of fucking Spanish city, and then you can jump into it and not just, like, crash right through and break your fucking neck.
Well, we'll see. Maybe that's the end of the movie and he dies.
Yeah.
No, but anyway, what I was trying to say is that this is a video game movie that is clearly made in cooperation with the video game people.
Yeah, like the Ubisoft logo is at the top of the trailer.
Yeah, that is an extension of the video game franchise. So we've come a long way from the Mario Bros. Movie.
Yeah, we've come a long way from the Prince of Persia movie.
Yeah, or something like that where we're kind of doing these in-betweens or we're embarrassed to be a video game movie or whatever. This is fully embracing it. But at the same time, I agree with you. I'm not sure what I'm looking at in the trailer, in part because the song choice of I Am a God, which I love that.
It's a good song.
It's a great song on my favorite Kanye album. It has no business being in this trailer.
It's so insanely inappropriate for, like, especially because it comes in, like, the lyrics come in when it cuts to the past, which is like, no, like, you're supposed to be giving me the sense of, like, oh, we're in the 16th century Europe, like, normally, like, this is Assassin's Creed games have generally really great music. Like, they quietly have really powerful soundtracks that people don't usually, like, comment on, but they're really they're really well done. Like, Austin Wintory, the guy who did the soundtrack for Journey, he's the guy who did the soundtrack for Assassin's Creed Syndicate, and the music in that game is fantastic because it fits the time period, and that's generally the way that Assassin's Creed games have gone, and I'm sure the soundtrack in the movie will probably follow that. But you would think that the trailer would do the same thing as, like, what the soundtrack of the movie would be like, that you're going to replicate that, like, the general aesthetic and style of the music of the time to give a sense of verisimilitude to you being in the past and not fucking a Kanye West song playing in 15th century Spain.
No, I honestly thought when it started, on my Mac, I swiped right to see, is my iTunes open?
Yeah.
Like, did it start? And I just assumed, like, oh, my iTunes is playing. Oh no, they're playing I Am a God. What the fuck? Did they just, like, shuffle their iTunes library and be like, we'll use that one?
Yeah. I don't know. It's weird. They might as well. They should have, like, if they were going to do that, they should have just gone with, like, the Inception, like, style of trailer, because they couldn't pick the right pop song to put on the trailer.
Indeed. No, that's a weird music choice, and then it's got this. Honestly, a lot of the trailer is the present day stuff to try to sell you on the Animus, but I'm not sure who they're marketing this trailer for.
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's a trailer for Assassin's Creed fans. Because I guarantee you, if you've never played one of these games, trying to set up the thing with the Animus, you can't do that in 2 minutes and make it make sense. Because they've spent like 7 games trying to make it make sense, and they never have.
Yeah.
So that whole thing is kind of weird. It's selling a lot of franchise iconography, but, you know, again, you can't just have the video game audience come see the movie. That's not big enough to make a movie popular. At least this, if it were Grand Theft Auto, I guess that would work, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, no.
You know, so it's a very confusing trailer to me.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of kind of how, like, I felt about that, like, Halo Forward Unto Dawn miniseries, which is well done. I felt like I was able to, like, be fine with that because it was a free web miniseries. So it's like, if it looks kind of cheap and weird, that's fine. But, like, when it's a big budget live action movie, there's a sense of, like, you should probably adjust the design of, like, the things in the game to make sense as props for a movie. Because, like, the Halo guns and the Halo armor are not designed to look good in live action. They're designed to look good for the art style of the game. And so if you're making a live action movie, like, the Halo assault rifle looks fucking ridiculous in live action because it doesn't even really make sense as a gun that much. It doesn't have sights on it, for God's sake. And then also, like, the scale of it is all weird because of the difference between the size of the Spartans and the Marines. So, like, that's always struck me as really odd, and one of the things that gives it sort of cosplay effect. And the Assassin's Creed thing has the same issue of, like, the hidden blade thing looks really good in the game, and it looks a bit silly when you see someone doing it in live action. Like, because it's, like, not stuff that people really use to fight, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm very curious about this movie. I am kind of looking forward to it just because it is such a different kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm massively curious about what the end product's going to be for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will see this December. I hope it's good. If not, I hope it kills video game movies forever and we can just be done with this stupid belief that you can do this.
Yeah, like it's just... It does feel like the moment has passed, and there's, like, no reason to do it anymore, because games have gotten so far, like we'll talk about with Uncharted 4. Right. It's like, there's no... Like, it is completely redundant to try to make an Uncharted movie, because video games can do what movies do and do so much more that it's like, why even try?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Naughty Dog is, and we'll maybe use this as a segue, they're constantly talking about their Last of Us and Uncharted movies they're working on, and I don't know why Naughty Dog wants to even be in that business, because you guys are doing it better than anyone in movies. For this kind of thing, no one is doing this better. Yeah. You know, The Last of Us puts every other bit of zombie storytelling right now to utter shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uncharted puts every action movie, and we've seen some, I mean, even though we were going to talk about Uncharted 4 has less action than the other games, the action sequences it does have still put everything in Hollywood to shame. Yeah. I think that car chase... Nothing that good has been on screen in years. Maybe Mad Max Fury Road. Yeah, but that's separate.
Yeah, Mad Max Fury Road is a complete masterpiece. Yes. It's outside of the normal conversation.
Yes. So I don't know why you would want to make a movie out of any of this. You know, so it's very confusing. But we shall see if Assassin's Creed can pull it off.
Yeah, we shall see.
All right, let's go ahead and move on and talk about Uncharted 4: A Thief's End.
All right.
All right. So Sean, Uncharted 4.
Uncharted the 4th.
Spoilers from this point out?
Yes. Yeah. Again, if you want a complete spoiler-free review of it, I wrote it, so you can read that.
And it's a very good review. So, but let's go ahead and talk about Uncharted 4 here. We gave a little introduction earlier. Yep. Good God, was I blown away by this game.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'll just give you my reaction to it, Sean, and I want to see how close yours was to it. I mean, I had high hopes for this game.
Yeah, me too.
I love the first three Uncharted games. I thought each one got better than the last. Love The Last of Us. Yeah. I still was not prepared for how powerful this game was, how mechanically solid this game is, how mechanically innovative this game is. I wasn't prepared for the visuals, certainly. Did you have that similar sense of just being like, I knew this was going to be good, but this is something else?
Yeah, and especially, like, I didn't expect it to be what it was, like, because I feel like they didn't quite... I mean, they definitely didn't market it as just a complete action fest. They were definitely leaning into the story side of it, and I knew coming out of The Last of Us that there would be a heavier emphasis on that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the game that I was completely shocked by, even having read a couple of reviews before actually playing the game, of, like, I didn't really realize how much the stealth thing was going to be a part of the combat. Like, I didn't appreciate how... Like you said, like, I knew that the visuals were going to be good. I knew it was going to be the best looking game on the PS4 because that's how, like, Naughty Dog has always been that for their consoles, because they're just a very good, you know, like, developer for, like, a single platform. That they're very good at eking out every single piece of power they can out of whatever platform they're designing on. So I was expecting it to look really good, but I wasn't expecting to, like, be in chapter 3 of the game and just, like, staring at the ground and being like, look at the fucking carpet! Look at this carpet! Like, holy shit, this carpet it just looks like a carpet. Like, I can't tell if they designed it or if they just fucking put a really high-resolution picture of a carpet on the floor of this motherfucking house. What is this?
This carpet is a big thing for you.
It was this massive moment of, like, and I talk about it in the review of, like, when you the first house of that's Nate's house that you just get to walk around and look at stuff. I was just fucking flabbergasted by, oh, look at this stuff. Like, look how good it looks, and look how much of it is there in the extreme. Because it's not just that it looks really good and is technically, like, over accomplished. It's also that there's just such an artistic attention to detail for, like, all the stuff of, like, just looking at the objects in the environment, and it all just looks appropriate. And it's all, like, and people had to build that environment. It didn't just exist. Like, they had to meticulously create it from their artistic design.
That is one of the most amazing things about this game to me, and it's always been an amazing thing about Uncharted, is that there are a massive number of things to see in every Uncharted game. Yeah. Even going back to Uncharted 1, like, the amount of space they have to build and design just for these sequences to play out is crazy.
Yeah.
And as those games have gotten bigger and more open, they've had more of that. And then Uncharted 4, I mean, the Madagascar part alone, that could be the map to a game.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and that's one level. I mean, it's nuts when you look at how much... Nathan's house could be an indie game. It could be a 5-hour...
It's the Gone Home house. Like, it's a little bit smaller than, like, the fucking mansion that those people lived in somehow and Gone Home. But it has that quality to it.
Yes, and so it is just every chapter of this game, and the chapters are much longer than they were in the other ones, is just this massive exercise in design and creativity and nuance and character study. It's really something else to just to behold. And yeah, so talking about initial reactions, I mean, the first couple chapters of this game in particular just blew me away, because I think they teach you what to expect and how to play this one, which is, it's different. You start with your kind of obligatory in media res thing, which is where they're on the boat, and I don't think it's a great in media res opening, but you kind of have to have it, because otherwise you would just start with Nate at the orphanage and it would be a little sad.
It gives a sense of, like, tension and drama to the story that, like, it would have been sort of boring, because, like, there's a lot of material they cover very early on in the game that, like, before they ever get into, like, any combat sequences or anything whatsoever, like, it's hours of gameplay before you get to the point where there's, like, really getting into, like, the action side of the gameplay. So yeah, like, if they did not start with this, like, sort of promise of things are going to get intense at some point, I think you would just been sitting there for a while being like, when is this going to, like, is this just going to be a game of me walking around and, like, hanging out with Elena? Because I am fine with that on one level, but also, like, eventually presumably I'm going to have to shoot someone, right? They had this whole, like, gun section in the attic with the toy gun.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so one of the things, I think one of the first things I tweeted about the game, and it was the point where I really realized how much I was loving the game, is that the first 3 Uncharted games are fast and breathless experiences.
Yeah.
Uncharted 3, I think, has a little bit more of, we're going to calm down and just explore and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But overall, it's still, you are moving. You could sit down in one day and play an Uncharted game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would feel
I literally did.
Yeah. You couldn't do that with Uncharted 4.
No.
And, like, the first couple chapters, so you have the little in media res thing, but then chapter 1 is Nate as a kid. You meet Sam, the actor doing the greatest Troy Baker impression in the known universe.
Yeah,
Holy
the kid
crap.
Sam is really good.
Yeah, that because I think the most powerful emotional moments come with the kids, so it's kind of amazing that that's where a lot of the heavy lifting has to go. But anyway, you have that whole thing, and it's just a little bit of exploration. It technically ingratiates you into the movement stuff, but if you've already played Uncharted, you don't need that. So it's just about exploring. And then Chapter 2 is you in the prison, and that's this whole long thing, which is also a flashback.
Yeah.
And then Chapter 3 is the Malaysia job chapter, where you're under the sea, and you're doing your work, and then you find out you're doing kind of a desk job, and once in a while, Nate gets out. And then Chapter 4 is in the house, and Chapter 5 is where Sam comes back.
Yeah.
And through all of that, the game is moving at a vastly slower pace than Uncharted ever has.
Yeah.
And frankly rivals The Last of Us for some of its just...
I mean, I would say it's even slower paced than The Last of Us, typically. Like because The Last of Us has lots of slower explorative moments, but at the same time, The Last of Us, other than the very opening, which is like the very, very opening, which is a very short sequence, the entirety of The Last of Us has a tension and pressure on it because of the setting that Uncharted takes place in, presumably the real world. Like it's not... Like, obviously, like, there are fantastical elements in the other Uncharted games, but there aren't really anywhere in Uncharted 4. And so it takes place in the world that we basically live in. And so there isn't this natural inbuilt tension to make you feel that even when you are walking around and, like, reading notes and, like, joking around with Ellie in The Last of Us, there is always, like, this overhanging tension to that game. Whereas in Uncharted 4, the, like, first 5-6 chapters of this game are, like... There's a vague sense of tension that you know things are going to get worse because if you weren't, like, they wouldn't have had that opening and they wouldn't have made this game if the plot didn't go anywhere. but you only know that because of that stuff. You don't know that because of, like, the life that Nate's leading. Like, it just seems like he's leading a normal everyday life that he's somewhat bored with.
Well, and the tension isn't that a clicker is going to come in and bite Elena's head off or something.
Yeah, the tension is that, like, Nate's just going to, like, grow up to be old and depressed.
Yes. So, but I could not have loved it more if I tried. Yeah. I think it was bold to go as slow as they do in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
But brilliant. So brilliant. I think Chapter 4 of this game, which is when you're at Nate's house, is one of the greatest levels in gaming I have ever played.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of the entire game, for sure.
Yes.
Like, because it is the moment where, I will say, I found there was that sequence in Chapter 2 where you were climbing the tower to get the map. Like, that got a little bit tedious to me because I felt like that was a slightly overlong section.
Oh, I liked it.
That was preceded by a long section of you doing a bunch of platforming in Chapter 1. So it's like that, like, and there are parts, it's like one of the things that I think is a great game, but I do think there are pacing issues in the first half, and Chapter 2 is one of them, where it's like, it dwells a little bit too much on that stuff where it's like, I'm fine with spending that whole chapter in Nate's house because that's a sequence that you could probably get through in like 10 minutes. I drag that out to like a 40-minute sequence of just going around to every single room, staring at every object, picking up a like weird like paperback travel book on the desk and just like flopping it back and forth in Nate's hand, going like, look at this, like, look at the sound design and the attention to detail on the physics of this stupid fucking travel guy that's like. In most games, it would just be this stiff piece of cardboard, and here it's like it fucking you controlling it with Nate's hand with the analog stick. It feels like he's flipping this dumb little paperback book in hand.
Yeah,
and it's like that stuff in that chapter is absolutely amazing, and it does make me wish that like they had focused some of the slower parts around more of that stuff in the first half of that game.
Yeah, well, and I should say the platforming stuff has always been my favorite Uncharted stuff. And I think I just have a higher tolerance for it than you do. Yeah. So I eat that stuff up like candy. I love that stuff. But I think to me, it's all kind of part of the same piece, which is whether it's movement through an environment where it's this platforming stuff, or whether it's movement through a house or a room where it's exploration. I get a similar feeling from it all, which is being at one with Nate and his surroundings.
Sure.
And it's something I think Naughty Dog does so perfectly in this game, of you feeling like you are there for all of this. And it is so, the word I have to use is immersion. It is so immersive, whether you are climbing a tower outside of this weird prison that you have stupidly gotten yourself put in because you're Nathan Drake, and you don't make good decisions on your own.
No, you don't.
Or with your brother, because your brother's not a good decision maker. He's even less responsible than you.
Yeah.
And then, you have that, and then you have Nate in his house, and, talk about dragging it out. I think I was in Nate's attic for, like, 20 minutes.
Yeah, because, like, you can go through all the stuff that's, like, from all of his old adventures and, like, pick up his old journals and stuff. I really like, they have, like, the journal from Uncharted 1 that Sully had, that when he got shot, it stopped the bullet. Like, that, like, really nice touches.
And there's Nolan North's acting through all of that, where clearly they have kept up the improvisational stuff.
Yeah.
And he has sharpened his improvisational knives, because Nolan North is on fire in this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone is. I mean, everyone's great. And really, I mean, my jaw dropped throughout that whole house sequence, but it somehow dropped even further once you meet Elena here, and it's just a conversation between a married couple. Yeah. There's no tension. There's not like Elena's like, why were you in the attic so long, Nate? Yeah. There's none of that. It is
they're just talking about their day. And like Elena just like sent an article to her editor.
Yeah.
And Nate like, fished out the tanker, which we'll talk about that sequence a bit more. But like it is just a normal, natural dialogue that is meant to establish their relationship as its narrative function.
And there's no contrivances. There's nothing like one is hiding from the other yet. That'll come up, but it's a big thing that Nate's hiding. It's not a little petty thing, you know? And so all of that is so powerful to me. It is so interesting. And there is nobody in gaming writing at this level.
Yeah.
Doing any kind of writing that is this naturalistic, this humanistic, and just this engaging when they're talking about nothing, really, and yet it is so powerful. Honestly, I think the most important release Naughty Dog has had in like the last 5 years in terms of building to this is The Last of Us Left Behind.
Yeah.
Because I could just think through all this as like, okay, they made Left Behind and they got bit by some kind of bug and this is what they want to do. Because that game, if you didn't play it, Left Behind is mostly action-free. The action that comes is in the like present-day stuff with Ellie in the mall. But otherwise, if it's Ellie in the past, it's just her and her friend exploring a mall. Yeah. And that's it. And it's a wildly compelling game for that. And a lot of Uncharted 4 feels like they figured out how to do that on Left Behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where what Left Behind managed to do was it found a way to sort of like capitalize on the game mechanics they had already designed in The Last of Us and reuse them in like unexpected ways for character moments. So that's stuff like, you know, God knows how many bricks I threw into the faces of different like enemies over the course of the main campaign of The Last of Us. But the best use of that mechanic is in Left Behind when you and Riley, her friend, have that competition where you see who can break all the cars in the 2 model cars in the mall with those bricks. And like, and they have the water gun sequence, and I love it in Uncharted 4. They make use of that. Like the more obvious spot is where they have Nate like gets his toy gun and he's like, and that section is really great because it's just he's like playing in his attic, and Nolan North's the improvisational chops there are on full display. But I think the more thoughtful use of that is in Chapter 3, where you're getting the shipping container in his job, and you don't know yet quite what he's doing because it's the very standard sequence in an Uncharted game of the kind of like, oh, like this is like what like Nate's job, that it's like it's probably like a shipment full of like ancient pirate treasure or something that he's like getting and like trying to pull up for the bottom of the ocean. And it's like this slow realization as you're going through that it's like that's not quite what's going on. It's like there's like this is a little bit more mundane. This doesn't quite look like it's the bottom of like it's not like the Great Reef Bed or something like that. And it's just making use of the swimming mechanics and their great physics on like being able to wrap up stuff that just feels really good in the game. And it's just him going through his job, and then you realize when it's coming up out of the bottom of the river that it is just a shipping container that fell off the side of the road carrying copper wire in this like major metropolitan city. That like that's what his job is that he's the guy who like scuba dives down and like finds that stuff and then gets it to pull up for the city. And like it's just this mundane job that takes advantage of like the one marketable skill really that Nate has, because you know Nate doesn't have like he never got a fucking high school degree, let alone he never went to college. Like he doesn't have anything that he can use to get forward in society in a normal way. And so them framing that whole sequence by having you actually engage with it and playing as Nate is so masterful, and it is the best use of that they have done. Like it is like what Left Behind did, but a step forward, because it doesn't feel like it's hatched onto like old mechanics. Is like it almost feels like the swimming mechanics in the game that they use in a couple of places was built for that sequence, and then they pulled it through the rest of the game, not the other way around.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, because it's so again, it's immersive. It lets you feel what Nate is feeling, which is I'm playing the game. I'm expecting adventure and excitement. That's not what I'm necessarily getting here.
Yeah.
We're getting something else, and Nate feels it. And what I love about this whole opening section establishing Nate's life is it's not the stereotypical version where like Nate is angry or unhappy.
Yeah.
I think he's fine. I think if Sam never re-entered the picture, Nate would probably go on and live a perfectly fine life. Yeah. I think he'd be a little
dissatisfied, I think.
Yeah. But, you know, you see when he's with Elena, he does what he does during the day so he can come home to her, and that's ultimately enough for him.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting version of this, because it's dissatisfaction, but it's not writ large. It's actually writ very small.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about the funniest thing I've ever played in a fucking video game, which is Elena is talking about the game she plays, and Nate's like, I could totally beat you at that.
Yeah.
And you find out Elena has a PlayStation 1, which I totally believe Elena would have.
Yeah.
And she's playing Crash Bandicoot. And then you find out Naughty Dog built Crash Bandicoot, their first game.
Yeah, the first level Crash Bandicoot.
Into Uncharted 4, and you, as Nathan Drake, play Crash Bandicoot.
And then you realize that all those people that have been clamoring for a new Crash Bandicoot game are like, maybe leave that one to the past, because this is an awesome sequence in Uncharted 4, but holy shit, I did not remember that Crash Bandicoot controlled that stiff. That ruined my memories of that game. It's like, because I have not played Crash Bandicoot since probably like 1998 or something. I was like 7 years old.
Yes.
Probably the last time I played fucking a Crash Bandicoot game. But it is an amazing sequence because it's so much of like what they are able to say so much about Nate and Elena's, their characters and their relationship together through very little exposition, and there's a lot of inference that happens. And I just love that, like, even if you didn't know anything about who Nate was, I feel like you would understand through this opening sequence that it's like he has had a very abnormal life, and it's like he does not had the kind of experiences that Elena had. Like, because if you go into Elena's office, you see she has a college degree on her wall. Like, you see, like she went and she sought adventure after she became an adult, like at the beginning of Uncharted 1. Like, she lived a relatively normal life up to that point. It's like Nate never had any of those experiences, which like enlightens a lot of his character motivations throughout the game. But by them sort of turning the cliche on its head of the cliche is that it would be the boyfriend that is very good at the video game, and the girlfriend is like the jokey one that's like, oh, I'll play you at it, and like not really know how to play video games. But by turning that on its head and being like, well, yeah, of course Elena, like, probably, like, she grew up and she like probably played the PlayStation 1 with her friends in college in the dorm room. And Nate, when would Nate have ever fucking played a video game in his entire life? Like, he's never had an opportunity. He's never been in one place long enough. He never had the family life that would have enabled those kinds of experiences. So, of course, he has absolutely no clue how to play a video game, and so he's just making fun of it the entire time about it's like, what the fuck is this guy? Like, why is a fox picking up fruit?
Yeah. He's a bandicoot. What's a bandicoot? It's like a fox. It's
like, what does a fox want with fruit? Why is he picking up all this fruit?
It is. I was dying laughing at this part of the game, but as you say, it works because it's very poignant.
Yeah, it illuminates so much about their relationship in such a quiet, effective way.
And it is a brilliant little meta moment for Naughty Dog to say, look how far we've come.
Yeah, it's like you're like staring at like this like fucking bright Technicolor, like awful polygon-looking Crash Bandicoot model running away towards the screen from the rolling boulder, I guess is what it's supposed to be. It's a bit too jagged to ever possibly be a boulder. It could not have rolled like that. It's like a big 12-sided die. But, like, you're staring at that on, like, their lovingly rendered, like, TV and, like, living room background and stuff. And there's something, like, incredibly surreal about that, like, you're sitting on a couch staring at this TV in this wall, staring at a TV in a wall, playing a video game. It's very weird.
No, I just think it's a great moment.
Yeah, and it's very smart.
When I got to Chapter 4, I'm like, wow, this game peaked early. I don't know if they're going to be able to top this. There are at least 2 other chapters I would say are that level.
Yeah.
And that's just on this side of the game. That's not even getting into the action platforming stuff, which there's all sorts of standouts coming up. Yeah. But, okay, so after this is when you meet Sam. And let's talk about that, because Sam is the new character here. Overall, this game is very focused in its cast.
Yeah.
It doesn't have Chloe or any of the other supporting characters we've come to know.
Yeah.
It is the main 3 of Sully, Elena, and Nate, and now Sam, and plus the villains. But otherwise, that's it. And I think it's actually, again, talking about that pace, I love how generally slow the game moves throughout. I love how much it takes its time with things, and I love how you basically have like an act of the game with each of those characters.
Yeah.
You have a big stretch with Sully, a big stretch with Sam, and the best stretch of the game to me, a big stretch with Elena at the end. And all of that just sings, but Sam is the new character, voiced by Troy Baker, because if they didn't get Troy Baker in this franchise by the end, it would be a crime.
Yeah.
And as a result, I think this is probably the best voice-acted game ever made. But what do you think about Sam Drake?
I think that it was a character that I was always sort of trepidatious about, like, ever since, because the idea of bringing in Nathan Drake's long-lost brother is a very hokey idea, and it sounds like a soap opera thing. And I think there are moments where, like, there are a couple of small story beats that I was slightly disappointed they took, just in terms of, like the Sam character is very stereotypical in some ways in terms of his function in the plot and his relationship to Nate. And in a lot of ways they undercut that, and they come up with very good explanations for Nate's and Sam's relationship and why he's never come up. But there are a couple of points where when Sam lies near the end of the game, that's just like, that's kind of what that character does in the story. And I kind of wish they could have come up with a slightly better way to do stuff like that. But in general, I think like it's almost insane how natural they make it feel. Like because their explanation for how Sam is a part of the story and a part of Nate's life, but you've never heard about him before, is that Nate thought he got killed at the end of that last job, and they have an incredibly close relationship together because they really have no parental figures. They had no parental figures to rely on when they were children, so Nate relies on Sam almost more as a father figure than like an older brother figure when he's young, which is what you see at the very beginning of the game. And so the idea of them being on that job together and Sam falling presumably to his death and Nate wanting to go back to him but like being forced to go on with Rafe, like that's a really powerful, effective explanation for it that is then like pushed even harder when you get to the section in Nate's attic where you find all the stuff, the relics from his other adventures, and you get to the one that has the stuff of like the Saint Dismas stuff, like the cross that you find in chapter 2, and he starts to pull that stuff out and then he puts it away. And that very naturally through a gameplay action that the player makes conveys so much about how Nate has reacted to the supposed death of his brother in the intervening years, that he just doesn't want to deal with it, he doesn't want to think about it, and he has just buried that part of his life.
And that's completely consistent with the Nathan Drake we know. Like,
absolutely.
He is not a guy who offers up his feelings.
No, yeah.
Just naturally. Like, I mean, you just look at the evolution of the Nate-Elena relationship through the trilogy, and I think you can see why he would never bring Sam up to her.
Yeah, and their relationship is always so rocky in so many ways that it's like even when they seem to be doing pretty well at the beginning of Uncharted 4, it's like you know that there are things about Nate's past that he hasn't told Elena because he's not someone that offers up that information. Like he's probably never told her what his real name is up to that point.
He hasn't admitted it to himself.
Yeah.
I mean, this is... we're going to get into this. You talked about it in the review. This is as psychologically rich a character study in a game as we've ever had. And... you talked about this being almost like the Watchmen of adventure games.
Yeah,
and looking into what that means.
Yeah.
But it is so powerful in how it breaks some of that stuff down. And I loved Sam as a character. I think
he's great, yeah.
Part of it, Troy Baker really... You couldn't ask for a better voice actor.
Yeah.
And I think he is so good in this. The writing is great, but I do think in terms of bringing a character to life in what, as you say, could be a very hokey scenario.
Yeah.
Troy Baker sells it 100%. He and Nolan North have all the chemistry in the world.
Yeah.
If anything, I realized how similar their voices are, though, because there were a lot of moments where, did Sam say that or did Nate say that?
Yeah.
And I was a little confused, but it would go back and forth, and then I would figure it out. I had never really thought about that before, but it's like because Troy Baker is working in like a higher nasally register, he winds up sounding weirdly like Nolan North.
Yeah, which is...
They're brothers.
Yeah, they're brothers, so they're supposed to sound similar, yeah.
It's great, and it's yet another character where you see how much range Troy Baker has, because he spent a couple years there where he was just kind of doing his own voice.
Yeah, where it's the same thing that happened to Nolan North with like his character Desmond Miles in Assassin's Creed. There were a couple of years after Uncharted where everyone hired Nolan North to just do the Nolan North voice. And the same thing happened with Troy Baker. It's like once he got popular, everyone hired Troy Baker to just do the Troy Baker voice. But like if you play The Last of Us for Nolan North, or you play the Batman games for Nolan North, or like Batman Arkham Origins for Troy Baker, you can see the huge range that they both really have.
The Last of Us for Troy Baker. Yeah. He doesn't look or sound like himself at all in that. And he doesn't in this either. But no, he's great. I think he's a really interesting character, and I think what is so key about those early hours being just kind of slow and letting you spend time in the past is that's how you sell Sam. You don't sell Sam by having the game open with Sam busting in and being like, hey, bro, and Nate's like, hey, bro, you died. They don't do that. And I can totally see a version of this game made by a lesser developer who would do that.
Yeah.
And it would just be awful. That's not how they handle it. And, in regards to you, because I do think the biggest point of contention with this character is going to be moments like the big lie that he sells Nate on, because that is the stereotypical thing. The thing with me, though, is I never believed what he said.
I didn't either, but like I feel like the game was trying to make you believe it really hard.
I think the game is trying to make Nate believe it. I don't think the game is.
But the game has you play through the sequence that he lies about,
and it's so over the top, and it's so
Uncharted. Like it's such an Uncharted sequence. Like I didn't believe it either, and I do feel like the game wants you to believe it.
Okay,
like I feel like that is the whole thing they did where like it's because it's the only moment in the entire Uncharted series where you do not play as Nathan Drake in one of the campaigns. It is that chapter where you play as Sam when he comes back and he gives the explanation of like he was trapped in he was in the cell in Panama or whatever with the like fucking Mexican drug lord guy, and then like they made this plan to get out, and he needs to go get the treasure and all that stuff. And it is a silly, over the top thing, but it does feel like something that would have happened in the older Uncharted games, and you haven't spent enough time with Uncharted 4 to necessarily like the average audience member to catch on that like that's not the style this game goes for.
I agree, but I also think the point is with distance, you start realizing. I think with distance from that sequence, you start to have some distance on Nathan Drake himself.
Sure.
And it's just part of the whole breakdown of that character in this game, is I think you start realizing fairly soon after that there's no way that's real, even as Nate cannot realize that because he is blind to that, because he has to believe his brother, because if he didn't... I mean, I think that moment, though, where the lie comes out is so powerful because of how Nate reacts, which is, I gave up my life for you. Nate is worried Elena will never come back to him and all this stuff. He is, and rightly so, because he was a real jerk to Elena in this game for parts of it. And so but because of that, he has to believe that lie. He wants to believe that lie. Sam sold him exactly what he needs to hear. Yeah. And so it worked for me because, again, although it is the stereotypical thing for that character to do, it also works on that character level for Sam and Nate.
It's a really well done, except for I think my main problem with it is that I would argue that the game plays it as a surprise. And it plays it as a surprise, not just for Nate. It plays it as a surprise for the audience. And, like, my resolution to that would be, like, have the audience know that he lied before Nate ever finds out about it. And the fact that they don't do that, it does feel like they are really trying to sell it to the player, not just to Nate. And I feel like that doesn't work. Okay. And it's, like, the only misstep, really, I think they make with that character, because... like, that's a character that's almost impossibly hard to do. Like, and it's crazy that they nail it the way that they do, and that they don't. And what the thing that they're able to accomplish that most games and movies would do this, because movies are so short, they would have to do this, is that most games or movies would just like move so quickly that they wouldn't give any of these moments to breathe and need these characters to breathe. And that's what allows the Sam character to work and feel very natural, is that you get a lot of time with him, and you get a lot of quiet time with him, and you get a lot of moments where he's talking to Nate, or even a couple of really great little scenes where he's talking to Sully and not to Nate, where that gives you insight into that relationship. That you get to really understand Sam as a person, and that he doesn't go through the thing that, like, the biggest stereotypical thing that this character could have been that I was really concerned about is that his whole thing would be that he's so jealous of Nate and Nate's life and what Nate has become because Sam hasn't been able to make anything of himself. Because that is what that character 100% would be in like a soap opera scenario, is that he's the jealous brother, the older brother that couldn't move on with his life and make something of him. And so he feels emasculated by his younger brother who is more successful. And they don't do that. Like, there are elements of that relationship in there because the elements of that are very true about their relationship, but him and Nathan have a very powerful brotherly constructive relationship with each other. And in some ways, you know, Sam being as destructive and dangerous, living such a dangerous lifestyle, he has a destructive effect on Nate, but he is very supportive of Nate within that schema of the relationship that they do have. And that's something I really love about the character.
There are no easy avenues that they take out in this game. They never go down the easy path of characterization or narrative. Yeah. And there are points in the earlier Uncharted games where they've totally done that, and it's fine because those are just genre conventions.
Yeah, and those games have such a breathless pace to them that you need to move on. You can't dwell all the time.
Yeah, but this one just, every time there feels like there's a crossroad between narratively, thematically doing the easy thing or doing the complex thing, they do the complex thing.
Yeah, like this is a game that loves to dwell. Like, that's what it does.
And I couldn't love it more because of that. And, you know, we talked on our Uncharted retrospective that, like, Uncharted 2 is really about the Nate and Elena relationship.
Yeah.
And Uncharted 3 is really about the Nate-Sully relationship. Yeah. And for a while, it seems like Uncharted 4 is about the Nate-Sam relationship.
But it is a game that is about the Nate and Elena relationship almost more.
Almost more. It's also about Nate and Sully. I would argue it's about Nate and Nate. I mean, it is about... It is bringing us full circle, and it is ultimately about Nathan Drake, about how these other characters are mirrors for him, for who he wants to be, for who he aspires to be, for who he sometimes wishes he was not, which is Sam. And I think that is so interesting, and I do love that the game has this very clear, to me almost, 3-act kind of thing, where early on it's you and Sully a lot, and then it's you and Sam a lot, and then it is, for the final stretch, exactly as it should be, you and Elena.
Yeah.
And Nate kind of coming to terms with who he is and that they managed to tell an Uncharted treasure hunt story within that while also doing the ultimate Nathan Drake character breakdown is a bigger creative accomplishment than I can even really wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Like, breaking that down is so hard because of how much this game does. And even though this game is substantially longer than the other ones, it was about 15, 16 hours for me.
Yeah, 15 hours for me.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, my last playthrough of Uncharted 3 that I did on the Nathan Drake collection was 6.5 hours.
Wow.
So it's that's a slightly faster playtime because I'd already finished the game, so I knew what to do. But at the same time, like, that is a really huge difference. Like, for me, Uncharted 4 is over twice as long as the last Uncharted game.
Right, and, the three, I was playing them for the first time, but they all took me maybe 10 hours, 9, 10. I think Uncharted 2 is the longest, and maybe 11 there, if you're doing it the first time through. But this is substantially longer, and yet it's not a long game. Like, it's not a 20-hour or 30-hour game.
Yeah, it's not like Witcher 3 or something.
Right, so when you do look at what they're fitting into those 15 hours... It's a tight 15 hours, I would still say.
Yeah, I think there's a couple... Honestly, I think the game could use to have an hour or two lopped off it, and we'll get to those sections. Like, it's not a huge complaint, but I feel like they could have tightened up the pace a little bit better. But, it's still, it's a game that needs to be longer than the other Uncharted, by a substantial amount, because it likes to sit, because it likes to dwell, because it likes to take its time with everything, and that's very good most of the time. But there are a couple of sequences that I think they could have tightened up.
I want to hear about that, because I did not feel that at all. But I have heard that complaint from you and a couple other people.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to see what places it was.
There's three things. There's the tower climbing sequence we talked about in Chapter 2 at the beginning. That's fine. I just feel like that would have been fine if they had found a better narrative impetus around it. But because it's the inception of the pirate treasure mystery, which it only gets really good in the back half of the game, because it's they spend the front half of the game is so much about setting up the character relationships. It doesn't have time to build that story arc, and so all that stuff with getting the St. Dismas cross, I don't think is particularly interesting because you haven't been given a reason for it to be interesting yet, and that's why I didn't like the treasure climb sequence, because I'm fine with the treasure climbing or the tower climbing stuff. I don't have an issue with that in these games. I enjoy the sort of platforming sequences, but it needs to have a more compelling narrative component to it, in the way that I really enjoyed going in into the bottom of the river and wrapping up all that stuff and swimming around down there. When it's not it's not like playing a combat section in Doom. It's not this invigorating combat gameplay experience, but it has a narrative mystery to it there that feels way more palpable than the narrative mystery in the tower climbing sequence. So that's one, is that Chapter 2 sequence. Then in Scotland, I feel that whole section, just it's not there's a sequence that I feel is too long. I just feel they could have tightened that up, because that's another sequence where you get to a point where they have mined all they need out of Nate and Sam's relationship to develop it in that section, and they start focusing on developing the pirate treasure stuff. But that stuff, again, that plot is not far enough in its sort of development to be interesting enough to carry the whole thing. And so it feels like it is, because also that's all information that gets conveyed much more effectively in the Madagascar sequence about Henry Avery gathering all these different pirates and conducting these tests. That's the Scotland section sort of introduces that idea, but I feel it takes too long doing that. And so the Scotland section, I think, should have been tightened up. And then it's the sequence right before you get to the Libertalia Island, where you are with Sam on the boat exploring that one smaller island. Overall, I really like that sequence. But again, I think it's a sequence that goes on a little bit too long, where they don't quite have enough character stuff and enough plot stuff to fill it. So those sections feel a little bit too loose to me. And overall, I think those are minor complaints. I don't want to stress them too hard, but I do think it is it is the only thing about the game that I feel is a prominent flaw to me, that is something that I would criticize as being this could have been done better. But again, it's a very minor complaint in the scheme of things.
And it's interesting because you're describing three parts of the game I love.
Yeah.
And I love, and it's not even that I can give you a specific reason for why those parts are great.
Right.
I just love being in this world. I think this game controls so well.
Yeah.
I just love every tiny little scrap of dialogue. I love every visual. I love just exploring. I had to make myself turn photo mode off so I didn't go crazy and do what I did with The Last of Us Remastered. And God knows I will play this game again with photo mode on, and it'll take me 40 hours, and I will just be taking pictures everywhere. I will do that, but I knew I couldn't do that the first time through, or I would just never get it done.
Yeah.
But, like, I just love being in the game so much, and, like, with that tower sequence, for me, I guess what it was is just being back with Nathan Drake, doing more treasure hunting. Clearly, they've improved all these mechanics. I thought that first puzzle was fun. I just love being in the world with that. The Scotland stuff I actually really did like, and I just think it's a good section.
I think there's lots of great stuff in the Scotland sequence. It's just like, it just goes on for too long. It's just a sequence that needs to be cut earlier.
These are such subjective things, too. Like, how do you feel pace? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, especially with the game, it's very difficult to argue pacing, because we could have, like, I might have actually been, like, dawdling and, like, staring at stuff too much in Scotland, and that dragged the pace down for me, and I didn't even realize it, and maybe you did. Like, it's so hard with video games in particular.
I mean, I will tell you how I played this game. It came out during the week, so I have work during the day, and then I would get home at like 5:36 at night, and I would sit down and I would play that game till like 11 or 12 solid, and it would always be, I would check my watch and I'm like, what the fuck? How is it already 11?
Yeah.
And I would just always be so enraptured in the game, I just didn't want to quit. And every night I thought, I can totally finish it off tonight. No. It took me, I think, 4 solid nights of play of doing, 3, and then like Friday night I finished it in like an hour or two. Did the last hour or two of the game. But like, every one of those was just, I was so deeply into it. It was until my eyes couldn't stay open that I'm tearing myself away. It's like when you're reading a really, really, really good book. It was like that level of immersion. Like, the last time a game did this to me was Batman Arkham Knight.
Yeah.
And luckily, that was during the summer, and I was off school, and I had the days, and I just played that all day, because it's a much longer game, obviously. But if I would have just like had to quit work if Uncharted 4 were like that, because I just could not tear myself away from this fucking thing.
Yeah, I had a fairly similar experience where it's like, because I think I finished the game one day earlier than you did, and that was because I pushed, like, I went to bed at like 2 in the morning on a night I should not have done that, because it was like, I was just close enough to the end. I was like, I can't do this. I can't, physically, I cannot put this game down, because I know it's going to ruin the end of this game if I don't just like do this whole stretch in one go. It was like the end of Metal Gear Solid 3 or something, only that was like way like a really long section where it's like, I can't just stop in the middle of this like motorcycle chase or whatever, like in Metal Gear Solid 3. I can't just do that. Like, I can't just stop in the middle of like, oh, let's go over and fight the last boss of the game. I can't take a break now. Like, that's completely absurd. So I just like pushed it really hard. But then also, like, I should say, like, because the visual design of the game throughout its entirety, and it's a long game and there's a lot of stuff in it, is so high, and like the visual design is just so superb. Like, I was constantly just staring at shit. Like I said, like at Nate's house, I was just staring at the carpet, and then I would be like staring at open vistas, and I was kind of doing like what you said with the photo mode, where early on, like, I was constantly taking like photo mode pictures of like the different vistas and stuff in the game, because they're so beautiful. And this game has like skyboxes that rival The Witcher 3 in terms of just like conveying something artistically about nature and about the weather that like it's hard to almost explain, because it's like, it's almost like more natural than actual nature and actually looking at a sunset, because it's just sort of artistically designed in that way. And then eventually I had to be like, I just can't do this all the time, because I'm going to be like messing with like, does this look better with 52% film grain on it or 50% film grain on it? I'm not sure.
Oh, I got so far down that rabbit hole in The Last of Us Remastered, and I just knew I had to just enjoy the game the first time out with Uncharted 4. With Last of Us Remastered, at least I'd played it once before.
Yeah.
But no, it is just incredible to just be with, and I just loved every fucking second of playing this game. So I never felt the slowdown, and I especially love the at-sea portion. I think that chapter...
I think overall the chapter's really strong. Again, it's that it goes on too long. Okay. That's like it feels like there's a point at which Nate and Sam stop saying new stuff to each other, I guess, is like once you hit that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. By the way, I wanted to ask, what difficulty did you play it on?
I just played it on the normal difficulty.
I played on hard. Okay, so I maxed it to the hardest you could go, which was hard and then crushing you on lock. But I played it on hard. And that's part of why I had to take a break the last night, was because at that difficulty, I knew if I was too exhausted, I literally just couldn't do it. So I was like, I want to be able to be awake and not hate the combat, because the combat is fucking amazing.
Yeah, the combat's really good.
And actually on hard, I would recommend playing on that, because it felt to me like as soon as I just started on hard, and I knew like if it's too hard, I can put it down.
Right.
Was my thought. And as soon as I got through like the first combat section, I'm like, nope, this is one of those games that is better the harder it is. Just like The Last of Us or something like that, where you want it to be a little on the punishing edge because it is so good.
I know, for me, my personal taste in Uncharted combat is I like enough leeway to play the combat like a complete idiot, because that's how I play the combat in that game. Like, I do the stupidest, funnest thing possible at any given moment. That's the calculator in my head, and I very rarely like input into that calculation, am I going to die if I do this? And so, yeah, like the way I play the combat in those games does not support harder difficulties.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the combat now? Or?
Sure, yeah. We might as well get to it before we get deeper into the story stuff. Since
That's the biggest surprise in this game to me. The combat in 1, 2, 3 is fine. It's only in 1 is it really on the side of bad.
Yeah.
But it never fully drags down the game or anything. But it also very rarely, I think, is the best part. Like, I'm never like, man, I can't wait to fire the AK again. You never really get into that mode.
I think having replayed the Uncharted games, because we talked about this on the Uncharted retrospective, but just sort of to sum that up, is that for me, I had the opinion you have the first time I played through Uncharted games, and the second time I played through them, I actually really enjoyed the combat in Uncharted 2 and 3. Uncharted 1's not so much, but
I enjoy it in 2 and 3. I think 2 has too much of it, and then 3 I think is paced well enough that whenever it comes up, you're ready for it and excited for it.
Yeah, I was absolutely excited to shoot an AK-47 to get in those.
No, and I maybe I said that too harshly, because there are definitely parts where I'm excited. I always have a certain fondness for it because I like getting to know the different weapons. I'm a FAL guy, love that rifle, stuff like that.
No, you just whatever has the highest rate of fire, motherfucker. Okay. Whatever I can just sprint out into the middle of this open field and just fire from the hip and with the nearest guy behind a pillar. That's the gun I need, or a shotgun.
I got
preferably.
But one of the things about those first 3 games, though, with the combat, is that in 1 and 2 especially, it got to a point where I thought I kind of was playing it probably the same way you were. I just want to be an idiot and have fun with it. Yeah. And so with 1 and 2, I wound up finishing both of those games on easy because I just wanted to get through it, and it was getting to a point where it was too hard, and it was just making it less fun for me. And Uncharted 4 was the exact opposite, where I was so happy I was playing it on hard because I think this is some of the most rewarding third-person combat I have ever played. It's definitely got shades of, to me, BioShock Infinite. I know that's a first-person shooter, but in terms of these big arenas with a lot of places to move and be, and it's these big kind of almost arena fights, but then it's got that stealth element that is similar to The Last of Us in some ways, but very different. I'm not even sure what to compare it to because it's fairly unique.
Yeah. It's almost a little bit like the new Tomb Raider games, but even more developed than the stealth system does.
But suddenly, every time one of those fight things came up, and it is so different because it's not just you're in the corridor and the waves come and you shoot them, which is what a lot of Uncharted 1 and 2 at least are.
Yeah.
This is, every fight is an event. There aren't just little small encounters. Every fight is an event, and those events are these big, very well-designed arena kind of areas where you can go full stealth if you want. That is a totally viable option.
Yeah.
You can go full idiot if you want. That is a totally viable
Always go full idiot.
Either you can do a mix, which I would do a lot. My favorite one in the game is the one where you're in almost that sunken house, and there's the underwater, and you can be a total idiot and then go back to stealth because of the water. It's great. But there's these big mixtures. I don't know if there's less enemies on normal. There's a shit ton of enemies on hard in some of those areas.
Yeah, definitely near the end of the game, there are some pretty dense combat sequences.
Yeah. And every one of them is a big event. It really is a giant shakeup of what Uncharted combat used to be. But man, is it fun and rewarding and just well done.
I mean, it's remarkably well designed, and that's for even when I think that honestly, the combat design in Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3 are underappreciated because those games don't communicate to the player very well the most interesting way to play them. That's which is the full on idiot. I'm going to run out. I'm going to beat the shit out of these people and then take their guns and their shotgun and shoot their buddy. Those games enable that kind of play style, but they don't encourage it. And so I think that's where lots of people just don't realize maybe the extent to which you can be very mobile in the Uncharted combat in Uncharted 2 and 3 and how rewarding that can be as a play experience. But Uncharted 4, I think, does a very good job of of not only enabling it and expanding that kind of like the ways that Uncharted gunplay was very good in the past, but it also doesn't like force the player to engage with it because of the design of the arenas are so large and they provide so many opportunities for interesting movement in terms of climbing up things and using them for stealth or using your fucking grappling hook, which is a great addition, and swinging around the environments. That is very reminiscent to the sky rails from Bioshock Infinite, that just allow you to engage with the environment in a very interesting way, and then the game demands you to do it by giving you all the stealth options. And like every time you walk into one of those arenas, you're immediately incentivized to continue the stealthy approach, because generally if you're with someone, they will say like, hey, let's try to get around these guys, and not like, hey, let's just shoot and kill everybody. And so you like get into the tall grass and you try to do it a little bit stealthy. And basically how I did every single combat sequence in the game was like, I would try to go stealthy as much as possible while still trying to take out people in a fun way, but like still going stealthy. And then the second that like someone spotted me, instead of like trying to like go back into stealth or something, it would just be immediately, okay, now shit's on. And then that's when like I jump off a tower and like grappling hook and like kick a dude in the throat and like take his shotgun and shoot his buddy and throw a grenade at like an explosive barrel with two people near it, and that explodes, and then run and like roll on the ground and grab a dude's like magnum and shoot like two people in the face. Like that's when like when shit gets off in this game, it really gets off in a way that's better than any of the Uncharted games have had. It's easily one of the best third-person shooters I've played in years, because I feel like that's a genre that hasn't had like really progressed much in a while. And you have stuff like the Tomb Raider games that like are doing their own thing and being interesting in their own right, but you haven't had something that was like back in the heyday with the Gears of War franchise that was like where third-person combat was really interesting and dynamic. And here, Uncharted 4 presents a very unique vision of that by enabling you to create this very interesting pace of the combat with the movement and the stealth, and then just like the really ridiculous action of how you can... It's like the most brilliant decision they ever made that allows you to just fire whatever gun you have equipped from the hip while you are swinging. It doesn't matter. Like, you have a fucking RPG, you have a sniper rifle, you have an AK-47. Because I thought that it was that only pistol weapons would be able to be fired while you're swinging, because that's what sane people would say. That's the only thing you could do. But they're like, no, fuck it. You have an AK-47, you have a shotgun, you can just, like, swing from this fucking tree branch with your rope and just fire your shotgun, like, wildly into the air. That's not only fine, that's how you should play the game, in my opinion. And that stuff is all great. Like, the melee stuff in the game is really well done. They don't quite have the melee arena things that sort of Uncharted 3 had. A couple of those sequences that were big, like, brawls. They have, like, one of those in the prison in Uncharted 4 that's kind of okay. Like, the combat system's not really built for that, but the melee combat wrapped up within the game gunplay is so good. It's the best it's ever been, because it's like short, it's quick, it's effective, which is what it needs to be, because it really rewards you mixing that in with all of your other combat tactics. But then also it's just incredibly satisfying, because like, games have, over the years, been doing the environmental stuff with, like, melee attacks, where, like, you know, if you engage a dude in melee next to, like, this rail, you'll punch him in the face and, like, push him off. And, like, games have been doing that. Like, Fable 2 touted that as a big feature. And slowly and surely, games have been, like, expanding on that in a way that it's, like, no longer... there are 3 of those things that can happen in the environments of the game, and all the environments of the game are designed so it's like there's always a rail somewhere, and there's always like this like perfect sized box because we made a contextual kill when you're near this kind of box. Like, Uncharted 4 doesn't have that. I feel like you are just constantly seeing new animations all the time when you're doing the melee, where you're like shoving a dude into a wall in an interesting way and like kicking him in the chin or something or, like, you know, flipping a dude over your shoulder with, like, his gun strap and taking his gun in one, like, really smooth animation. And all throughout the game, the animation quality is easily the best that any game on the market right now. But in particular, it's not just that the animations are really well done, it's that there's such a staggering number of them that it feels like you're never seeing the same thing over and over and over again when you're doing the melee. And that's really rewarding.
Absolutely. It is... I felt like every encounter in this game, I didn't play a single one of them the same.
Yeah,
I felt like everyone was this very unique, very fluid chemistry set, experience where, you know, I totally did ones where I was stealthy all the way through, and I did ones where I tried to be stealthy, immediately fucked it up, and then I'm like, fuck it, let's see if we can do this.
Yeah.
And we go for it. And I did mix and matches. And again, the one that it took me the longest, but I had so much fun with it, is the sunken house one, where you're going, I felt like I was going in and out of the water. I was basically being Aquaman with a gun and just running around and doing crazy things. It was an absolute blast. And just like the basic mechanics of the shooting and stuff like that are so good. Like the way they have the reticle and it turns red when you're about to get a kill. All of those things, I feel like they've figured all of that out, and it feels so satisfying.
Yeah.
And no matter how good you think the combat was in Uncharted 2 or 3, this is just such a massive step up. It's on a completely
different level. It's on a different level than anything they've designed in terms of combat. Like, I really like The Last of Us combat, and I think it's really well designed for that game. Yeah. But even then, like, it does not approach what is on display here, just in terms of like level design and encounter design, and like even beyond just how like solid the fundamental gameplay mechanics are. It's the same thing that like me playing Doom right now, as weird as it is to like see a very strong design connection between a new Doom game and Uncharted 4. Like they do have like a similar quality to their combat, where it's like their combat is very free, and it allows for a huge amount of player creativity in terms of how you approach it, and that's what combat needs more than anything else. And it's why, while you can enjoy like Call of Duty campaigns here and there, and they can be fun for like the brief experiences they are, in general, most Call of Duty campaigns are the same kind of encounter that you have to approach the same time over and over again, and when you die in a Call of Duty the fight, when you respawn, you approach the fight the exact same way, you just use the same tactics a little bit better, because there's not a lot at offer for you to do things differently. Whereas games with great combat, like a Gears of War, like a Halo, like Uncharted 4, like Doom, every time you die, you come back and you do something different the next time. That's not just, well, I'll try to aim a little bit better. It will be, well, why don't I just like jump up over here and swing around this thing and use that as cover to take this guy out? Like I didn't even think to do that last time. And that's the best kind of combat that a game can offer, and Uncharted 4 has that. And it's crazy to me. It's completely insane to me that Uncharted 4's combat is this good.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just good, it's great. It's great. Like it's competitive in the market for like some of the best third-person shooter. Like it's the best third-person shooter game out that's like new right now, and it's competitive with like stuff like Max Payne 3 and Gears of War 3, which are some of the best third-person shooter games of the last few years.
And that's what I'm saying. It's so insane, and I just felt these rushes of exhilaration playing those sections that I have not felt in a shooter, first-person or third, in a while, I feel like. Like, it is on par with stuff like The Last of Us, but even bigger than that, of being in that environment and so completely immersed. Again, that being the word I have to keep going back to, where you are just completely at one with the game, having fun with it. And, man, it is amazing. And you have an interesting kind of almost complaint.
Yeah, it is my other complaint about the game, which is like a slightly facetious complaint, but is also kind of honest, is that in my review I said that it is something in all of my years about talking about video games critically, I have never encountered. And when I started feeling it after I finished the game, like I really like had to do this soul searching of like, do I have this actual reaction to this game? Is that Uncharted 4 straight up does not have enough combat in it, which is fucking crazy, because you never say that about a game. Either a game has as much combat as it needs, or it has too much combat. Like, typically, games have too much combat. Like, even though I don't feel it as hard for Uncharted 2 as you do, Uncharted 2 absolutely has too much combat at the end. Like, most games, like, drag on with, like it's... Dark Souls 2 is another example of like one of the reasons why that game goes on too long, is it's like there's too many bosses, there are too many encounters, there's too much stuff, it should have stopped. And most games have that problem. I can't think of another game that does not have enough combat in it. Like I sat there while writing the review for like an hour, like Wikipediaing stuff, like trying to bring up something in my memory of like, is there another game that I felt like did not use enough combat?
There are plenty of games where you have like mechanics that aren't used enough or something like that. But in terms of just the basic combat system, no, I don't think there's any other comparison. And I didn't feel that. I thought it was a good balance. I thought it was a good pace. Because it is such an event every time it comes up, I thought it was just fine. But I see where the complaint comes from, because it is good enough that you kind of want to say...
Yeah, and like, I think my main issue with it isn't just that, like, because I think there's enough combat for the pace of the game generally. Like, again, like, my problem with the pacing is not that there's not enough combat. My problem with the pacing is that, like, there are a couple of quiet moments that go on too long, and I don't think, like, they should have shoved in another combat sequence at the end of Scotland or something like that to fix that. That's not my issue with the pacing. But I think my issue with the combat stuff with the game is that, like, the pacing with it is fine. It doesn't need more combat in that sense because the game takes well advantage of the very quiet nature of the story and everything. But the combat mechanics of the game are so highly accomplished that they don't give you enough to fully explore and master them through like one playthrough, or even like get deep enough into it to feel like you like take your first step. And like honestly, Uncharted 4, like it provides this menu option where you can go back and play through select encounters, which is nice, but it's not like quite the same. Like really, Uncharted 4 needs like a horde mode or something like that because the combat is so good that I don't want them to mess with the pacing of the single-player campaign by just shoving combat encounters in there, which is what I feel like a lot of games do. That's why you get the too much combat problem. But at the same time, the combat's so good, and it's not like the competitive multiplayer is a very different thing because you don't usually combat in the same way. It's like the game needs something more repeatable where you can experiment with the combat, because I felt like by the time I got to the end of the game, there were several different weapons that like I had hardly even used. Especially when they introduced like the second tier of weapons in the last half of the game, it's like there are like specific ones that's like I got to fire like once or twice, and that's kind of it. It's like, and that's my issue with there not being enough combat. It's not an issue really with the single player campaign, with more with like they made something really spectacular there, and I just wish there was more that I could do to engage with it. Like with like the like sort of like the stealth stuff in Arkham City, where they had all the different challenge rooms that you could do. That like I always really loved the stealth stuff in the Arkham games, but like they didn't capitalize on it as much as they could in the campaign because of the pacing. But the challenge rooms allowed you to really get a handle on these really great stealth mechanics they had built for the game.
I totally agree with that, and I think I don't know what their DLC plans for Uncharted 4 are, but if they wanted to do a $20 pack that was a challenge map pack or something, I'd buy the shit out of that.
Yeah, like that's really what I'm asking for with that. So, like I said, it's sort of like I don't know, a backhanded compliment or something like that. It's like, man, your combat's so good. I just want to do more of it, man.
It totally is a compliment, I think, because it's a less is more. I mean, I do think having, even though this isn't an issue we've seen before, too little is better than too much. I really do. I think I would much rather have an Uncharted 4 where you get to the end and you're like, I could have used even more combat.
Yeah, then Uncharted 2 where you're like, man, I'm done with the combat in this game.
Yeah, they leave you wanting more, and that is always preferable. There are games that have, like The Last of Us, I think actually has like the perfect balance of just enough. And not too much, not too little. But this is, if it's a little too little, that's okay, because everything else
is definitely better than the alternative.
And everything else you're doing in the game is still brilliant and fun and great. The puzzles, the platforming, the little quiet moments. And it really does, the lack of combat in parts of this game does lead to what I think is the big takeaway that you made in your review that I would make if I were to review it or anything like that, which is that this is a game that is interrogating the Nathan Drake character at the same time as it is sort of interrogating the entire genre to which it belongs.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, okay, so this is the part in my review where I come to the end where I talk about that. For me, Uncharted 4 is like with Watchmen, or Knights of the Old Republic 2 is another, I think, very good example of a video game that has done this, that like deconstructs part of the genre that it's in, and that like Uncharted 4 is a game that's not just like critical about like the failings of Nathan Drake, but it's also critical about like what this genre is and like the conventions of this genre and the way that it uses of that, like the way that I think the genre uses these excuses for like its heroes like Indiana Jones and Nathan Drake to like call them heroes when at the same time like they're not. And it's the way that like in Watchmen they do this like with superheroes, where it's like, you know, we have these characters like Batman that we say within their fiction like, oh, these are great people, and like, oh, they're these fantastic superheroes that do these great things. But when you put a character like Batman or a character like Superman in the real world and look at the consequences that kind of person existing in a real world setting with real consequences would have, you get Rorschach instead of Batman. You get this fucking psychopath that's this vigilante that like abuses people like physically and emotionally. Or you get for Superman, you get Dr. Manhattan, who is so powerful that he's completely devoid of humanity, and he doesn't even really understand what he's doing anymore because he exists on a different level from people. And so Uncharted 4, I think, does the same thing with Nathan Drake by putting him in the real world, by removing the supernatural stuff and by removing the like very romanticized adventure qualities of it that you get with like trying to go get the Chintamani stone or whatever in Uncharted 2. You get to see that like Nathan, the life that Nathan Drake has led, especially through the lens of Sam Drake leading that same life after Nathan's gotten out of it, you see just how harmful it is to everyone else and to himself. That you get to see how destructive it is for his relationship with Elena, and you get to see how destructive it is for his relationship with Sully, and how destructive it is for like Nate and Sam's relationship, that they can't sit down and talk about anything, and they can't sit down and talk through their problems and find a better solution, and that Nate is just so willing to go off with Sam on this adventure with like the lie that you find out what is a lie that Sam tells Nate, and that Nate never interrogates that Nate never sits down and says, I've got a wife, I need to bring her in on this, and we can think of like other ways we can talk to this guy, we can do something else, but we can't go on this crazy fucking global trek to find a treasure that probably doesn't exist. And so that's what it does, and it also does that by giving you a very comprehensive list of characters through the past that you see through journals and through the environment, that starts with Henry Avery, who like creates the treasure at Libertalia. We'll get deeper into that plot and why that's so good. But starts with him and creating his treasure hoard by hoarding all the treasure of all the other pirates, and that you find out that they also take the treasure of all these other pirate like members that they bring to their commune, Libertalia, and that they create this massive treasure hoard, and they betray everyone, kill all these people, kill the other pirates until it's just Henry Avery and Tim Teo or whatever that guy's name is, and like it's just them, and they have their treasure, and then ultimately they kill each other for the treasure, and it sets this chain reaction through all these different like steps they've left that point to where they are, of all these other treasure hunters that have gone on their way to get this treasure, and it's this like this foolish journey of avarice that's not even about necessarily the money, but it's ultimately about like them trying, all these people trying to prove something about themselves. That's like, I am like this great hero. I am this great adventurer. I am not just an orphan that like, you know, was never properly educated and had to educate myself. I'm not like abandoned by my family. I'm not all these things. I am this great person. And you see that. You see all these notes, and you find all these dead bodies along this way of all these other people that have been doing exactly what Nate is doing. And they're all like, well, I'm going to get it, goddammit. Except for they obviously didn't, because there's a skeleton right here holding a fucking destroyed piece of parchment in their hand. And Nate, until the very end when he's with Elena, and they're like, especially when you have that fantastic scene where they come upon the sort of the council of pirates and all the different skeletons of all the pirate captains that were poisoned, that stops. Finally, Nate takes a second and thinks about, oh, wait, I'm not different than all these people. I'm not different than Henry Avery. I'm not different than these pirates. I'm not different than like the guy who had the fucking Dismas cross that has been chasing his grandfather. I'm not different than Sam. I'm not different than Rafe, who's the antagonist. Like, we are all doing the same thing, and we've been doing the same thing because we're fucking idiots. And it's like, it's what Indiana Jones does. It's what Lara Croft does. And it's a game that criticizes that very notion of the kind of protagonist that is at the head of these kinds of stories in games, books, movies, whatever. And it just looks at those people and say, hey, you're not good people. Like, whatever you think you're doing, like, whatever excuses you have for, like, saving the world, Nathan Drake, like, that's not why you have ever been doing any of this stuff. And that's just that's a convenience, a narrative convenience that we've come up with to help justify the person that you are. And that's how it deconstructs the genre to me.
Absolutely, and by the end of the game, it's very telling, you know, the last chapters, he is not in that for any of the reasons he's ever been in it before. He's there to save his brother, and that's it. And that's why he gets out, where Rafe doesn't and where everyone else hasn't. You know, the title of this game is A Thief's End, and I hate usually doing the title deconstruction, but I actually think it's a very clever title here with the non-distinct particle A of being, it's about a thief, and it's not necessarily Nate in that title. It is kind of, because he stops being a thief at the end of the game, but it's also about everyone else and all these ends that he encounters and possible ends, and that those lucky misses that Nate is so famous for in the other games really become thematized here. And you know, it's something that Uncharted 3 flirts with and has in its DNA. But that's not the main thrust of
it doesn't go full hog on it. Like, it does it enough to sort of, like... Because it does it in Uncharted 3, it does it more in the context of Sully's mortality, which is because it's about their relationship. And it doesn't aim it so heavily at Drake himself.
No, and Nate's younger in that, and he's got different issues. It's you know, he is fully on in this game trying to live the married life.
Yeah.
And that is so interesting. And where the game goes in the end, as you say, it's not predictable. It's not that Nate dies, which I think would be the easy way out of
yeah,
this
exactly,
one.
Yeah.
It's not that Sam dies, which would be the easy way out on this one. It's that Nate overcomes his character flaws to a certain degree,
yeah.
and then Elena realizes your flaws are who you are.
Yeah.
And your flaws, or my flaws, are who I am. And we love each other. I don't love you for someone you're not.
Yeah.
And you don't love me for someone I'm not.
You love me for my Crash Bandicoot game.
Yes.
That's why he married her.
Right. And let's be who we are. And that's the end of the game, which I think is so beautiful, is it's Nate and Elena finding a way to be who they are without also being idiots, because they don't have to be.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It is like the message of the game at the very end is like you can have fun and you can have adventure, but you can't be reckless at some point. Like eventually you get too old to be reckless anymore, and you have to think about what you're doing. And it is like, because at the beginning of the game, while like Nate and Elena's life works, it's like there's obviously, I mean, there's that like kind of like weirdly chilling sequence where like Elena's talking to Nate and then he stares at the painting on the wall that was originally the fucking Assassin's Creed 4 concept art, and like the music, like not only the dialogue drones out, but like the music and everything drones out, and Nate's just staring, and it just like is cutting between his face with like the slow zoom in with the painting. It's like obviously there is something there that like Nate has not put to rest with himself, and probably Elena hasn't with herself either. We just don't like focus on her like internal psychology as much as Nate's, and so it's like the game does say, it's like, hey, like people need a balance in their life, and like going cold turkey the way that Nate does at the beginning of the game and saying like, I'm never going to take any risks at all because that's what we promised, is not the answer. It's like, live the life you need to life, and don't like restrain yourself too much, but also like think about what you're doing. Like don't be a fucking idiot.
It's a game of, I think, pretty immense profundity in how it views just the human condition at a certain point.
Yeah.
And you know, I praised when we did our Uncharted retrospective, like, I thought the best moment in Uncharted 3 is when you finish the boat section. The boat section is great.
Yeah.
But the boat section is also the craziest shit Nathan Drake has ever done.
Yeah.
And he gets back, and he's pretty much, he didn't actually find Sully, so he's kind of failed at his mission.
Yeah.
And he just lays down next to Elena, and he finally just says, I'm sorry. And she says, I know. And I think that was, like, to me, up to that point, like, the best moment Naughty Dog had ever done.
Yeah.
Uncharted 4 feels like that moment.
There's, like, one of those moments every single chapter, at least.
Yeah. It's just where it just punches you in the gut.
Yeah.
It punches you right where you live, and it's so profound. It's the kind of thing that I feel like most movies or TV shows might get once per season or once per movie or something.
Yeah.
No, Uncharted 4 is just throwing them out every couple minutes. It's insane.
Yeah, let's talk about one of my favorite ones of those. There's one of those moments, I feel like, halfway through Uncharted 4, very specifically similar to what Uncharted 3 does, but it kind of goes in a slightly different direction with it, which is you have the big marquee action set piece of the game, where there's the tower falling sequence even later on, which is sort of similar, but the only really big action set piece that's in the style of the old Uncharted games, which is what was in that one E3 demo where you're in the car with Sully and you're racing down the hill to get to Sam's tower, and it's like, and it has all these different stages where then you're like grappling hooked to the back of this fucking truck and dragging along in the mud and shooting people, and then it does like the jumping from car to car thing that Uncharted does.
We'll talk about it more later.
Yeah, but what's I think the best part about that sequence isn't just like, hey, you get this like awesome sequence. It's that like right after that sequence, Nate and Sam, like, you know, they're stopped on that motorcycle and they're sort of like laughing it off and like, man, holy shit. And they're like obviously having the time of their life. And then Nate and Sam go back to their apartment where like with Sully, and they open up the door and Elena's there, and then immediately like the breath gets knocked out of all the characters and I think the player, in terms of it is one of the most effective uses of gameplay as a thematic device in a story I've seen since like the end of like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons, or like the BioShock twist from the original BioShock, of just you have been doing something in this game that like you had been sort of pent up for because they hadn't done one of those big action set pieces in the game. It's so deliberate with your pacing that I feel like by the time they finally give it to you, you're so anxious and so ready to just like, because you've been looking at how spectacular the visuals and everything in the game are, and the audio design, just the entire presentational of the element of the game is easily the best of any game out there right now, especially on consoles. And so you're just like, I just want them to go insane with this. I just want the boat or the mansion from Uncharted 3. I want the train from Uncharted 2. Like, I want you guys to just go crazy with it. And they go crazy with it, and it's exhilarating, and it's exhausting, and you're just like, your pulse is pounding by the end of it, and you're just like infused with adrenaline. And then you come in, and Elena's there, and then Nate's reaction and the player's reaction is ideally the same, where you're just like, oh, fuck. Oh, fuck, like, this is exactly what Nate should not have been doing. He has taken the exact wrong path here. Like, he has gone back to his old life, and Elena is pissed about it, and she's right to be pissed about it.
But she's not the shrill wife in that moment.
No.
And that's why it's so good. Because it is, every one of these games, they have Elena technically playing the role that usually comes out sexist and backwards and fucked up in these movies and games that use this kind of character archetype. And that is not this character at all here. She is so much more complex than that. What hurts the most about that moment for Elena, I think, is that Nate didn't tell her.
Yeah.
It's not that he's doing this, it's that he didn't tell her and he didn't ask her. Because if he had brought this to her about Sam and everything, she would have found a way to help him. And she would have found a way to work this out together. And I don't think she would want her and Nate to go on the crazy car chase and stuff. But, she's not going to be mad at Nate for having the dead brother and those things.
Yeah.
And that's as that moment unfolds, I totally agree with you. The breathtaking of, oh, Elena's here. This is what actually matters to me.
Yeah.
This hurts. But it's what comes after that I think makes the moment work so well, because it is Nate and Elena hashing through their problems. And, well, not really. They don't come over anything there. But it is this incredible just collision of these characters in the way that I think what's most fascinating about that is how Nate has this reflected on himself and how ugly he becomes in that sequence.
Yeah.
Where, again, Elena isn't doing any of the stereotypical shrill stuff that would, happen to an Indiana Jones or something here. She doesn't magically become the character from Temple of Doom or something. But Nate has this light shone on him by her and really by what he sees of himself in her. And he becomes really ugly by the end of that sequence in a way that really hurts. And it feels like scars have been left by the end of that.
Yeah.
And the way he doesn't explain himself and he doesn't give this up as he should.
Yeah.
But you also kind of don't want to as the player because you just got off of that incredible high.
Yeah. It is like I said, it's the contrast of those things of like, you just like, oh man, that was fucking awesome. And then it comes light of like, oh, right, like, Nate's been fucking all this stuff up all along, and like him go like this big car chase and him being so excited about it. It's just emblematic of all the things that he's been doing through Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, and now 4, and maybe a Golden Abyss on the side. I don't know how that one stands.
But I don't think Elena's in that one.
Yeah, I don't think she is either. She's not in the first hour of that game, I can tell you that much. But that's like he's always been fucking this up. Like he's always been fucking up the relationship with Elena. That's like the story of his fucking life. And that contrast of the one big set piece and then them immediately being like, no, bad Nate, and like rapping the player on the knuckles with the ruler like you're back in the Catholic school at the beginning of the game. Like that's so effective a storytelling device that it takes such an artistry to really pull off by creating that contrast and making it feel natural and not forced in any way. Like to me, that's one of the most standout moments in terms of the storytelling they do in the game that feels very bold and creative.
Absolutely. And I think where I want to take this discussion next is just talk about some of those character relationships and some of those character moments. But what comes to mind most immediately is something I kind of was thinking of saving for later, but I feel like we have to talk about it now, is with Nate having these underlying urges to do these self-destructive things, what comes to mind when I think back on Uncharted 4 is what I think might be the high point of the game for me, which is Chapter 16, The Brothers Drake, which is the chapter where you return to the flashback from the beginning, and it's you and Sam going to get your mother's stuff.
You get to play Gone Home 2.
Basically, you do.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was kind of funny because when you have that first flashback in Chapter 1 and it ends with, I found Mom's stuff, and they leave, I was thinking, oh, maybe we'll come back to this flashback, maybe not. Like
and by the time you get back to it, it had been so long that I kind of thought that was as far as it was going to go.
Because I didn't think they needed to. It was fine as it was. But really you realize, oh, that was just the introduction for what is honestly the centerpiece of the game. It's kind of the emotional climax of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which is that you go back and you see basically the night that Nate's life as we know it started. Mm-hmm. And it's something kind of funny that I said on our Uncharted retrospective, I never wanted or needed to see a confirmation of him not actually being Nathan Drake.
Right.
I said, I think it's implied well enough, and it's an unspoken part of that character that he's obviously lying about being Francis Drake's ancestor, that I don't need to see it. I do need to see it, as this scene showed, because they do such a good job of it.
Well, because they tie it in so tightly to Nate and Sam's relationship that's where it needs to exist in this game, because it's a decision that they made together.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so as you say, this scene is Gone Home 2. You go into this mansion. It is enormous. Every time I think the sequence must be almost done, there's another room bigger than the last one to explore. I mean, to talk about it, I guess.
I mean, the whole thing is so remarkable, because it's also where... I want to talk about this a little bit, that the game does something that Last of Us also did very heavily and very successfully, that the older Uncharted games didn't really do much, which is that sort of finding notes and stuff in the environment and picking them up and looking at them and reading them. And I love that they expand that and combine it with Nate's journal mechanic that they had sort of developed over the original Uncharted trilogy. And here, they use that very effectively to tell all these little environmental stories along the way of, like I said, all the skeletons you meet of these other failed adventurers after the same treasure. And they use all that very effectively. But I think the best use of it is in this whole sequence where you are exploring this house of this old woman that you find out has a relationship with Nate and Sam's mom, who was an archaeologist and a sort of adventurer in her own right, and more of a Indiana Jones figure, it seems, than Nate. She didn't seem like she was the thief and a scoundrel, more official. But this old elderly archaeology woman had a relationship with Drake's mom, which is why she has all this stuff, and her giant mansion is just chock full of all these antique artifacts and stuff. And then tucked among them are, you enter through the attic, and you're and from the attic you start making your way through the house. And as you make your way through the house, you find all these notes that are tucked in there, and they're telling the story of this woman's life. But I think what they do so well is that you don't realize that's what's happening at first. At first, it's just... you're looking in the attic at all this weird old stuff, and then you find one random note written by this Japanese dude saying, it's hey, I saw your... it was a letter that he sent her that's hey, I saw your seminar on this and that, and I have access of these old Tokugawa era samurai armor that I wanted if you could verify, and we could talk about it over coffee or something. And there's a picture of him on the back. And you just see that, and it's oh, okay. And you kind of I didn't think much of it, and I put it down, and then you continue exploring the house. And as you make your way through the house, you start seeing all these other things where you realize, oh, that letter from that Japanese dude was from decades and decades ago. And you're seeing they had a relationship together, and they got married, and they had a kid. And then you start seeing oh, and this woman's life parallels, as all the stories, all the subplots in the game parallel Nate's life in some way. Hers is, she has a story of, she meets this Japanese dude that they sort of get together over their love of artifacts and archaeology. Then they eventually get married. They have a kid, but their marriage falls apart. And she ends up getting cancer. The kid, and because of the way that the marriage falls apart, and they get divorced, and the Japanese guy dies sort of alone, raising the son they had together, and the son resents the mom after she gets cancer, and she tries to reach out to him, but he just sort of refuses it, because you get the sense of how just sort of detached he's become, how resentful he is of her, and how much she sort of ruined their family by not being able to give up this adventurous life that she had as an archaeologist, going into exotic places and digging up old ruins and all that stuff. And it is what Nate's life could potentially become if he didn't stop what he was doing, and he ruined his relationship with Elena. He would find himself eventually old, alone, in a house filled with random artifacts, because the house is organized a lot like Nate's attic at the beginning of the game. That's just big boxes full of all this random stuff, and weird samurai helmets and swords and stuff. And there's a great thing where little tiny boy Nate can pick up all these different helmets and stuff that he finds along the way. And the only proper helmet is the samurai helmet, because Nate is an honorable samurai. And it's the best on the pic. It looks the best on the picture that you take. But the way that parallels his storyline so subtly, and you don't expect it, you don't anticipate this to be more than just another flashback sequence with maybe you being able to look at a bunch of stuff in the environment and have a bunch of colorful dialogue with Sam and between Sam and Nate that illuminates more about their relationship. But it also becomes this really heart-wrenchingly depressing story of this old woman with cancer dying alone because she pushed her family away from her, in the exact same way that Nate has been doing over the course of the game. Because this sequence also comes in literally right before Elena enters back into the story. So it gives And it actually, how it is framed is him telling this to Elena. So
it's the confessional moment of the game.
Yeah,
it's a purging.
Yeah, it frames Nate's psychological internality as him recognizing this stuff now, and him opening up to Elena and to the player about his past. And that, like, I think that Nate now internalizes and understands the way that this woman's life parallels his own, and the dangers that path represents. And so all of that stuff, the narrative function of it is absolutely sublime, not even going into how it builds up the Nate and Sam relationship, but it is also just like the beginning of the game with Nate's house, and then what you get in the epilogue, you get this other massive, like, huge mansion this time, just full of stuff for you to poke around and look at, and other paperback books and magazines that you can flip around your hand and be like, man, the physics on this are really good. It's like, it's just full of stuff with that, and little things that allow Nate and Sam to comment on that, like, just are little tiny pieces that you find out about their relationship, sort of tangentially to the dialogue that very naturally comes up from the things in the environment. It's like no other developer does that the way that Naughty Dog does. And they seem to do it so effortlessly here that it's kind of, you almost don't even notice it when it's happening. That it's like you have to take stock and realize, like, oh, like, all of these moments are telling the story and are building up this story for me. And, like, for me playing the game, trying to be, like, very active and critical of it, because that's how I want to play a game like this and not just sort of, like, absorb it as just, like, sort of popcorn entertainment. It's like you have to take a step back and be like, oh, wait, like, they're doing this so subtly in some of these places. It's like, I need to remark this stuff and remember this stuff for how it is contributing to the narrative this game is telling, because it's so effortless.
Absolutely, and that's why I think some of the critical reaction to this game, if anything, has been, like, underselling the achievement.
Yeah, I think it is.
Because they're not getting into the meat of this thing, which is these moments where, again, Chapter 16, The Brothers Drake, that could be a game, like an indie game, all on its own.
Absolutely.
That you would praise as Game of the Year or something. I mean, it's not as fully fleshed out as something like Gone Home, because that's all Gone Home is.
Yeah.
But boy, does it makes you think of Gone Home, and that is a high watermark, I think, in that kind of thing to want to be comparing yourself to. It makes you think of The Last of Us Left Behind, that they basically did that within Uncharted 4. In some ways even more powerfully because of how well it does. You know, you talked about the kind of meta-narrative going on there, but just the basic atmospherics of that scene of you and Sam and their relationship building, it's incredible. It is, again, those kids do such a good job, especially the kid voicing Sam is doing a really great job with that performance. I actually think I saw Troy Baker tweet something about it, that they kind of, I think, worked together on that. I
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. But anyway, just the way that goes back and forth. Again, you can get the Tokugawa-era helmet and put it on, and you can take the picture and just those little moments. And then when the picture comes back at the end of the game, tears. Just fully, just amazing, because you lived that memory. And it is so powerful because of that. And that you have that whole sequence in the house, and then it goes beyond that to them having to escape the cops, and Sam having to, basically leave Nate alone, or no, he doesn't leave Nate alone, but they're going to have to go off on the run. Yeah. Their life has been blown up. It's the first time Nate blew up his life. It's going to happen more and more.
The revelation of, like, who their mother really was, and, like, what... Like, because they have that moment of where, they take up, like, why their mom's big thing about, like, before she died, the thing she was working on was, like, there's sort of some of the same dismissed treasure, which is also, like, adds a really powerful motivator for understanding why Sam is as adamant about finding the treasure as he is that it's not just about proving something to himself, it's about proving something to his mom as well, who's passed on, but it's the work that she started. But then the other thing she was working on was her theory that Francis Drake did have heirs that were through, like, a mistress or something, and that she died before she could sort of, like, publish it and then, like, fully research her claims. And so them taking on the name of Drake is, like, that they're not just the heirs apparent to Francis Drake and, like, everything that he represents as a seafaring explorer and all this stuff, and the sort of, like, romantic hero that he can be sort of seen as historically, but then also an heir to their mom and the work that their mom did, because you don't ever see anything directly, but they clearly had a very troubled relationship with their father, and so there's something about that of them, like, taking up their mother's torch and her work in their own way that is both, like, it's really heartwarming and beautiful, but it's also very tragic because you see how the ways in which, like, Nate and Sam have not grown up because of, like, the traumas that they suffered as children.
Absolutely, and I love the way that moment is played, where it's basically Sam trying to cheer up his little brother.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Nate being very deeply traumatized at this point, and Sam being equally traumatized, probably more so, but pushing it down inside because he wants to be the good big brother for his little brother. And it is so powerful how all of that is played. I think this is just a great game about brotherhood and about siblinghood.
And then framing it through a flashback like that, in like a very lengthy flashback and 2 lengthy flashbacks, like allows they're always very good with the dialogue at conveying and the acting at conveying this brotherly relationship between Nate and Sam. But there's something about going back to that night in those moments, as like these formative moments for these two brothers, that really makes their brotherly relationship feel a lot more real in the narrative, because that is a big part about being brothers, assuming that like the two brothers grew up together. That's like you have known each other, like the little brother has known the big brother literally their entire life. Like that's my relationship with my big brothers. Like, he has always been a part of my life, and he will always be a part of my life in some way, no matter what, because it's like, that's the kind of relationship you have with family, especially like that. And so them really getting in and having you as the player experience that relationship from the past, from young Nathan Drake's perspective, really does so much to cement that relationship so that it feels very real, and it's one of the many steps they take in the game to not make Sam just feel like the deadbeat brother, because he's not the deadbeat brother. Like, there are aspects of that character there, and it's like Sam has made mistakes, and he's not the greatest person in the world, but like, he's had a fucking bad, hard, shitty life that he has tried to make the best of, and he has done really well within that framework along the way, and has done a good job at protecting Nate the best he could. And it's like, you really get to feel that relationship, and it doesn't feel simplistic or one note.
No, and even in the ways where he does get a little competitive with Elena for being, I don't even know if jealousy is the right word, but it's almost like jealousy of like, oh, you're the one now who's making him better, but that was my role for so long.
And it's also of like, you don't understand Nate the way I do because you weren't, because again, it's that thing of like, I fucking changed this guy's diapers when he was a baby, when I was and I was like 6 years old, lady. Like, you don't, like, I don't care that you're married. Like, you do not understand my brother the way that I do.
Yeah, it is a very interesting relationship, and I love the way it kind of resolves over the course of the game. So I think we've talked a lot about Nate and Sam.
Yeah.
Any particular Nate and Sully moments we should talk about? Because it's not... I think Sully is used very well in this game.
He's used very well, but he's not the focus.
No, and I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. He had Uncharted 3. That was...
He did. I do think there are lots of great moments. I mean, there are so many standout set pieces that we're not even going to get to, but like the whole robbery in the early part of the game where you have to get that heist in the auction that's going on is great, and I think Sully's standout moment of the game is bidding for the thing and going back and forth.
And then, like, with Rafe, like, sort of, like, outbidding him, and then he's just like, thanks, Sully. You know, if you bid me higher, I thought I was going to have to kill you. And then I love Sully's raise, like, let's ruin this asshole's day. Like, it's such a cliche line, but I think this is the best delivered I've ever seen it been. Like, because Sully is, even though he's not the focus of the game, he is still Sully. He is still, like, the most likable character in any video game. You just love the dude, and he's the kind of emotional support that Nate needs, and in particular, I feel like he has such a fascinating, unspoken relationship with Sam that, especially at the end of the game, them going off together is so fucking perfect.
Yes.
But, like, those couple of moments where, like, especially right after the heist sequence where Sam and Sully are sort of sitting and talking when Nate goes on the balcony to talk to Elena on the phone, and you just get this tiny, like, 5-sentence dialogue between the two that speaks so much about how, like, Sam resents Sully because Sully was there for Nate when Sam wasn't, for whatever Sam was doing when Nate was, like, young, because you got to see Nate and Sully's first meeting in Uncharted 3, and obviously Sam was not there at that moment, and so, like, Sam's obviously very competitive with Sully, and he has been for a long time because that relationship stretched back to their childhood, and you know, the fact that just little things like how Sam always calls him Victor and stuff like that, like, it sells so much about their relationship.
The funniest things in this fucking game, outside of the Crash Bandicoot sequence, is when you're in Madagascar driving around, and every time Nate gets out of the car, Sully and Sam just start having a pissing contest together, and it's so great. I love it. And not even always that. Sometimes it's friendly. Yeah. Like, they can go back and forth. I will say, like, the character animation in this game is unbelievable, and we'll hopefully talk about it at length a little more later. I noticed it most with Sully.
Sully's character model is striking. Yes. Like, because I think there's something so alive about Sully as a character in particular, and he's so charming and suave and just cool that they really captured that. Like the character has always had that sort of almost like vaguely Bruce Campbell quality about him. That's like here, like when Sully like gives one of those smirks he has, like it really lights up his face and like the wrinkles and like it accentuates his age, but then also like how much energy the character still has so well, and it's. Like, I was going to say it's uncanny, but it's not uncanny in the uncanny valley way. It's, like, uncanny in terms of, like, you just don't expect animation to be able to deliver something like this to you in a video game.
Absolutely. So I noticed it a lot with Sully. Yeah, I love all the parts with Nate and Sully in this. It's great to have a little more of that before the end.
Yeah.
And he's Uncle Sully at the end.
Yeah.
And that's so touching.
That's perfect.
Anyway, so that's great. We talked about Nate and Sam. So let's talk about Nate and Elena, because you come back from that Brothers Drake flashback, and it's Nate telling this story, and the best part of that is seeing Elena's reaction, which it doesn't make her immediately absolve Nate, but it's also like, okay, I finally understand my husband. It's like when she's finally getting.
It's something where you know that you can understand that she knew all along that like there was stuff about Nate's past that he had never told her.
Yeah.
And there is like a relief present in her of like, fucking finally, you dipshit, you finally told me this stuff.
Yeah. And I think from that point on, I found that the best part of the game, and I don't even know if it's because mechanically it is. It's just because you have Nate and Elena, and they spend such a great, solid stretch of time letting that relationship breathe and be explored within the action context of the game.
Yeah.
And just the dialogue and the exchanges between them. The actress who plays Elena, Emily Rose is her name. Boy, is she fantastic in this one. And I just love how they use Elena as an equal partner in the end of that game, where she is like, and she helps you more than Sam or Sully put together by the end of that game, because she's really good at this. Mm-hmm. And that's why she's mature, is she's really good at this and just chooses not to always go out and do it. But it's interesting as you see her kind of start to fall in love with this again with you.
Yeah.
I say you, but you feel such an ownership over Nate. I kind of feel like you want to say that. But, so yeah, I mean, you have that whole stretch. There's some really good puzzles there near the end. I mean, we'll go back and talk about some of those gameplay things later. But what about the Elena-Sam relationship in this stretch of the game struck you, I guess?
Well, it's like, I think the thing that they do is, because for me as well, like I think the whole section on Libertalia on that island is the best part of the game, because it's what the game's building up to, and it's perfect. Yeah. But it is definitely that section at the end with Nate and Elena that is, to me, like symbolic of the best things that this game does, is that it's like a long like TV episode almost in terms of the pacing, where it's just you're getting, it's all this dialogue between Nate and Elena that is constantly getting interrupted by things that they need to do, and they're constantly just getting like one step forward in this conversation of them just unpacking all this shit that Nate has done and what they need to do going forward. And it's just like constantly, it's just pushing forward and forward for Nate to finally just like say I'm sorry and like apologize and own up to everything he's done and like really explain himself in a way that like he doesn't, like in part of that like section, because again that's also the section where you uncover the mystery of Libertalia, you find the pirate council with all the pirate skeletons, and like it's part of that journey is not just Nate trying to explain himself to Elena, it's about Nate trying to explain himself to himself and trying to like understand, like, because he has his reasons for doing what he does, but he doesn't really understand it. Like, he's just, the way that Nate always does, he's just kind of like operating off of instinct and doing whatever he feels is the best thing to do in the moment without thinking about the consequences. And so it's this process of him talking to Elena, bouncing things off of her, and like trying to sort of like test the waters and figure out how he really feels about this. And it is, like he says, is like he's just afraid, like he's afraid of losing her, he's afraid of losing his brother, but he's afraid of losing himself and like who he is, and that's why he couldn't tell her, is because he didn't want her to pull her into it, but more importantly, like he was afraid of like that part of himself getting shut down by her. And it's like, in that relationship is so interesting and complex, and the way that they dole it out is so deliberate and smooth and slow, as with the rest of the pacing of the game, that it's like it's the perfect way to tell that kind of story that most games that are a AAA blockbuster game would not be able to afford themselves that kind of time to really explore this relationship. And that's what makes that section of the game so remarkable, is that it just does it. It just does it smoothly, slowly, at its own pace, and it really develops the two characters, and it develops this very complex relationship and this complex argument that the game needs to make about Nate and his lifestyle.
I think it was true before Uncharted 4, but I think it's doubly true afterwards. There has never been a romantic couple in gaming depicted with anywhere near the level of maturity and pathos as Nate and Elena. And this game proves that so much. The level of, I keep coming back to this word, but maturity and thought and emotion that goes into that relationship in that final stretch where it's not just she's going to break up with him because he lied. And it's not just he lied because he wants to have fun. It's so much more than that. Yeah. And it can't be reduced to any one thing. And Elena goes through these peaks and valleys with her love for Nate there at the end, where she's never at the point where she's just going to abandon the dude. Yeah. Because she doesn't. That's going to make her feel bad. Yeah. And he's never at the point where he can just immediately unburden himself of everything. It is this push and pull and this give and take between the two of them. And because you have the gameplay throughout all that, and you have puzzles to solve, and you have mountains to climb, and you have things to try to figure out within the environment, and you have, pieces of things to read, and you have all of that, and you have firefights to go through, and Elena will help you with that.
Cars to steal.
That's a great sequence. Yeah. Because you have all of that, the relationship is literally just evolving in real time in front of your eyes. Yeah. And that is so special, and that is so, to me, unprecedented. In this romantic context, it feels like because Ellie and Joel in The Last of Us, obviously not a romantic thing at all. It's a father-daughter kind of thing, and that is the best of that kind of thing. Yeah. And it feels like they've taken that same depth and given it to Nate and Elena here. Exactly. Which is kind of funny, because Nate and Elena, in many ways, I think were kind of prototypical of Joel and Ellie in the earlier Uncharted games. But they've brought that depth to it here, and it's absolutely stunning. And the way it builds to that ending where, again, this game feels like it could end far earlier than it does, because you get to Libertalia halfway through. Yeah. And then the last half is on this island, but you explore it in such depth, and the end of sort of the Elena sequence is finding Sam, but then, of course, Sam has to be a jackass and run away, because he has to. That's who he is.
He needs to, because, again, he has very good justifiable reasons for why he cannot just let this go. That's what that Brothers Drake chapter, the most important work it does, is, again, to, they do so much and they do so well at keeping the Sam character from feeling cliche and annoying, because the cliche, annoying thing for the character to do is to just be fuck everything, I'm just going to go get that treasure. And he does that, but you understand why he does it. And, honestly, I was rooting for him to do it, because it's something that he, as a person, needed to do. That it's so important to them, and him and Nate, and their past and their relationship with their family, that's he has to go after the treasure. He can't just let it go, because what would his life be if he did? He could never forgive himself. That's not the kind of character that Sam is.
But I find the pace of this game so interesting in that respect, because basically from the moment the Brothers Drake chapter ends, Nate is done with the stupidity of this life.
Yeah, he's given up on any idea of getting the treasure. He just doesn't care anymore.
He's not trying that. He and Elena, he's working through it, and especially by the time you get where he's going to have to go after Sam, we are heading into the conclusion to this franchise with a pretty radically changed Nathan Drake, who is not in this for the reasons he was even at the beginning of this game. And I think that is such a fascinating way to kind of set up the ending. I will admit, if I had one area of this game I was going to complain about, I don't love the ending stuff with Rafe on the ship and all that. I think there's some really great stuff in there, but because it's almost the obligatory, we have to finish this up so we can actually do the ending to the game. Yeah. It's not the most exciting part to me. And they try to make it exciting. The sword fight is fun. Yeah. It's fine.
I do appreciate that they didn't try to do they kind of gave up with that with Uncharted 3, but the Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 2 both have really dismal boss fights. At least with Uncharted 4, it's exciting and visually looks fucking amazing. Because that's another section where the character animation with Rafe is just kind of unreal. Especially because he's such a proper character with his hair slicked back and everything throughout the whole game. And then finally at the end, when the treasure's in sight, you see just how completely manic and insane he is. And again, it's one of those things that reflects so heavily on everything about the story, because it's another one of those subplots that's Rafe could have been Nathan if he had taken a different path in life, and he could be this insane dude with his hair all ruffled, challenging another guy to a fucking cutlass fight in the middle of a burning ship like a fucking idiot. Yeah.
But it feels a little obligatory because, frankly, it is, and it is for Nate. This is what he has to finish this and get out of there, and the reason he gets out of there is he's not there for the treasure, like Rafe is. And so it's a very, I think, fitting ending to those things. But then you go in for the actual ending, which is they kind of take the Return of the King approach here, where it's a lot of cutscenes just building and then finishing it off before you even get to the epilogue, which is so beautiful I wouldn't even know where to begin. But those final scenes are very good with them getting off the island and Sam...
Sam and Sully, like...
When Sam feeling humbled, just in general, and Sam kind of, I think, having his own character revelations. Sam is clearly never going to settle down like Nate is going to settle down.
Yeah, because like that part of his life like completely missed him while he was in prison.
Right. But I do, yes. Him and Sully going off together to do whatever the hell they're going to do.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because it is like, I like how it feels like a heavy burden has been lifted off of Sam from the adventures they had and like him being able to put that treasure to rest and having like proved to himself and like finished what his mom started and all that stuff. But then that doesn't necessarily mean that he just stops his lifestyle. It just means that maybe he's not quite as stupid about it and as dogged about it this time. And he just gets to like have cool, fun adventures with Sully across the world. And then that's a good ending for the character.
It's a great ending for the character, great ending for Sully. And then Nate and Elena, as the game must, ends on them with Elena's whole plan to buy with the gold they got the shipping company or whatever it is, the salvage company, I guess.
Finally do the Malaysia job.
Yes, finally do the Malaysia job.
That should be Uncharted 5, the Malaysia job.
It'd be really boring, I think.
Yeah.
Hopefully. But no, and that she's going to get her camera, but she's going to buy a really expensive camera, as she says. And just, again... I'm sitting there watching that sequence in awe of the performances, of the character animation,
of the writing,
especially of the writing, is what I was going to say, because the back and forth they have there, it's clearly calling back to the end of Uncharted 2.
Yeah.
And on its own, it's probably not as good a conversation as the end of Uncharted 2.
Not quite as funny, but
it's even
conversations are.
But it's even more poignant because it's the ending to this, relationship as we're seeing it on screen, and just the way they kind of come to this place where they've had this breakthrough, and Elena gets to kind of be the hero in the end there. And I love that she gets so much agency in the end there, that she's going to be the one kind of driving this. She's going to get her show again. That's a great kind of full circle thing. Yeah. That's how they met. And I think they would obviously be happy doing that. Mm-hmm. And Nate has gotten over some part of this within himself, that he will be able to have these adventures without wanting to be a complete idiot. Yeah, which was, again, the defining character trait of Nathan Drake in the trilogy.
Yes,
so
it's fucking stupid.
And then we get a little interlude with Crash Bandicoot.
Yep. If you weren't fully convinced that bringing Crash Bandicoot back wasn't a good idea, you get to try that level again and be like, man, this franchise had its time and we must let it go.
I could not get through that level. I was really bad at it.
And I've beaten that level multiple times in my past, and like going back, it's like, how did I ever beat this level? Like, this controls like complete dog shit. Oh my god!
Again, Naughty Dog's come a long way.
Yeah.
And then you get the ending, which is with Nate's daughter.
Yep.
Cassie, named for his mother. Which, when you realize that, just this whole ending is just tugging on your heartstrings.
Yeah.
I mean, you have another kind of Gone Home.
Gone Home 3.
Yep.
We got 3 Gone Home games and 1 Uncharted game. That's a good ratio.
Absolutely. And we're just exploring their future home where they're on this island together. And it's funny to me because this is a fairly cliched ending on paper.
Yeah.
That you have in a lot of different pieces of fiction that is often done pretty inelegantly. Mm-hmm. Let's be honest. I like certain parts of the Harry Potter ending, but I think it's one of J.K. Rowling's more inelegant pieces of writing. There's some beautiful stuff in there, and there's also some clunky stuff in there.
Yeah, it's a very show finale for a long-running TV show kind of thing. Yeah, it's all the characters' kids.
Yeah, this is the best done version of it ever. Yeah. Because for one, there's not a lot of writing in it. It's a lot of just quiet Cassie exploring, you kind of building it for yourself as the player, exploring this life they have. And of course, you're guided along to where you're going to ultimately have to go. Yeah. You can go at your own pace. It's so beautiful to just linger in this, and really the themes speak for themselves, which the reason you do this kind of ending always is because it's about characters who had broken homes as kids, and now they've found the future they never could have in their pasts.
Right.
But it is done so much more beautifully here because you saw that broken life when they were kids. You lived that in the gameplay, and now you're living it as Cassie, who is clearly a much better adjusted person than Nathan Drake.
Yeah.
And that's the happiest ending you could possibly have, which is that Nate overcomes his character flaws, has a happy life, and creates a perfect life for his kid. That's pretty happy as these things go, and because you get to live that and experience it it is such a beautiful moment of gameplay.
Because I think one thing about it that really helps it avoid feeling cliche when, like I said, on paper, it is extremely cliche. And I have to admit, like, when I saw that was happening, that was what the epilogue was. Like, at first, I sort of rolled my eyes at it. But then when realizing that, like, one, awesome, I get another dope house to just, like, look around and pick up paperback books again, because it's like the physics on that are really fucking really good. Like, seriously, try it for a second. It's uncanny. But you get to do that again, but then it's the fact that it's like you realize, while it is a cliche ending on paper, I can't think of a video game that has ever ended like that. Like, because video games very rarely go for a quiet ending. Like, it's just not custom to the medium, especially, like, when you're talking about AAA blockbuster like action games, like you end on a huge explosive note, get your like one little like closing cutscene, and then you walk off into the sunset with Sully or whatever it is. But here, like, you get this extensive. I mean, it's not extensive, but you could be there as long as you want. Like, you could walk around that house and walk around the beach and play with the dog and like look at like her room and all the stuff, and then go into
the photo albums.
Yeah,
oh my god,
photo albums are really good. Yeah, that's another thing. You get the wedding photo album and Nate's house, and then you get to come back to it and see like all the other photos they have, and you get to see like I like that there's like that one like Archaeology Now magazine or whatever that has Cassie's picture on it, and then there's another framed Archaeology Now cover on one of their walls that has like an article in it that says "Can you dig it?" which is a really great article name for an archaeology magazine to have. And you get to see, like, they have, like, their desk with, like, the thing where, like, that they've been excavating and sort of, like, dusting off. And, like, they're actually archaeologists and they're not just going in and blowing everything up all the time like Indiana Jones. And then getting to open the closet and finding the picture. Like, the dialogue around that picture is so great. Like, is that you and Mom and Uncle Sully? And are you holding a shotgun? It's like...
Well, and that's where you get the distance of just how good Nate has been on his word, basically, of that Cassie can't even really imagine the dad we knew.
Yeah, or like their dialogue around her, like, seeing the holster is like, is this a gun holster?
Yeah.
Like, that there's a quality of them, like, sort of having buried their old life, and then... I also like all the dialogue there is so perfect when Nate and Elena comes back in and they're like, do you think she's old enough? Do you think we can have the talk now? And all that stuff, like, it's just such a thoughtful ending that the experiential element of it being a video game is what really makes it work, of you being able to play as Cassie, and again, the environmental storytelling throughout the whole game is really remarkable, and this is sort of the last dose of it you get, that there is so much about Nate and Elena's life that they have had in like the 16, 18 years they've had since the end of the rest of the game that you just played, that you get to see like, there's so much that's unspoken about that. There's so much that, like, if you just rushed through that sequence and went and got the dialogue between Nate and Elena that ended the game and opened up the drawer, like, you would not understand anything about that relationship. But if you take your time and plod through the houses and look at everything, you get such a sense of, like, staring at all the stuff in Cassie's room about the kind of person she is. That she, like, plays like the PS1 stuff, so it's like she plays some video games, but she's into like retro games because she's not in one place long enough necessarily like to build up all that like a big video game collection and everything. And she has a guitar in the corner of her room, and you get to see like all the framed posters and everything, and the thing that Nate and Elena have like excavated and are dusting off, and all that. Like, that's all unspoken that you get to infer for yourself as to what they have been up to just by observing things in the environment. And the level of trust that Naughty Dog puts in the player to be able to infer things about the story in the world just by observing things in the environment is so profound that it's really like there are moments of Uncharted that make me recall like Dark Souls or Bloodborne in terms of like the skills that I developed by playing those games and being able to infer like profound story things through just like the objects in the environment, like came in handy in Uncharted 4 in a way that like that's not a feature that most games take advantage of, that only video games can really do, because only video games give you the freedom to explore something at your own leisure, to really like dig into the environment. And it's so perfect that they end the game that way.
Absolutely. I remember the game finishes, you have this great ongoing conversation basically between Nate and Cassie about one of his crazy adventures. Like, I found El Dorado. You found the City of Gold? It actually turned out to be a statue.
Yeah.
That whole thing is just great. But it cuts to black, and Henry Jackman's beautiful version of the Nathan Drake theme comes in as the title comes back up, and I clapped. Like, I do it. I've never done that, like, on my own as something ends, but it was so perfect. I just had to let it out some way, because it's just, that is how you end this. And I cannot at all think of a good, like, analogy for this in video games where they really just definitively closed a franchise on the most perfect note possible. The closest would be Arkham Knight. And we're in this era right now where a bunch of franchises from last generation are finishing on this generation.
Yeah.
But mostly you think of franchises that end or reach a finishing point, and it has to be much more gentle with it because they're probably actually going to make more. Like Halo 3 is not actually the end. It would be a perfectly fine ending if it was, but even then you can kind of tell they're hedging their bets a little bit.
Yeah.
The Chief is still out in space and all that.
Microsoft owns Halo, so no matter what Bungie wants to do, it's not the end of Halo.
Right. Or, if you want the really bad version of this, Metal Gear Solid 5 was not the, like, good ending of that series or anything.
No.
But, mostly it's Series A don't end, and if they do, they don't end this beautifully, this definitively, this perfectly, where in my heart of hearts, do I want more Uncharted on some level? Sure, I love Uncharted, but do I really want more Uncharted? No, because 1, 2, 3, 4, that is a perfect fucking franchise right there, where
there's nothing else they can do with the characters.
No.
Like, that's what we say when, like, Uncharted 4 is the perfect ending. Like, because it's like, of course you could write a story where it's like, like, Nate gets pulled back into life again, and, like, now Elena and Cassie, like, you could do it again. There's nothing, like, you don't have to come up with, like, some way to, like, resurrect Nathan Drake. Like, they didn't kill him. You can tell more stories with the character. The thing that they do, though, is that they put such a definitive end to the thematic point of more stories with these characters that there's no reason to. Any storyteller would look at what they've done and say, it's like, will you stop? Because there's no other story to tell. There's no more material that these characters need to undergo, because the thing that, like, the story they've been trying to tell the whole time is Nate getting out of the life, and that's like, they finally did it. And it's like, they did it in such a way that, like, Nate's not going to fall back into that life that he had, because he has finally gotten past it in a way that, like, the ending of Uncharted 1 did not convince you of that. The end of Uncharted 2 did not convince you of that. And even Uncharted 3 didn't really convince you of that, because you hadn't seen what the life outside of these adventures was for Nathan Drake to be convinced that he could stay in it. And it's finally, you get that here. Nate has been tested to his limits, and he has been changed as a person, and he is done as a character, that there's no more need to bring him out.
Absolutely. And, we said on our retrospective, if they never made another game past Uncharted 3, that would be fine. It's not like you need to. Uncharted 3 would be a perfectly nice conclusion to things. But it feels like, I think from the marketing of Uncharted 4 we got this, and then when you play the game you really get it. Naughty Dog had something in this story they needed to do more. They needed to put the finishing point on it. And they did it so successfully, so beautifully, so powerfully, that it feels like, I think, looking back on it, I think we're going to remember the Uncharted series even better than we would have before, because of how it ends with Uncharted 4. It's the kind of, I don't believe in the thing where a bad ending, like, ruins everything that came before. I think that's a stupid way to look at things.
Right.
But I do think a good ending can retroactively make everything better. And yes, I think Uncharted will now forever be, I will point to as one of the all-time great video game franchises, because it was 1, 2, 3, 4. Every game is exponentially better than the last one, and it ends in the absolute most perfect way possible. How could you not think this is just one of the great achievements in gaming?
Yeah.
It's incredible, and I think I'm so glad Naughty Dog looked at that and said, yeah, we do have one more story to tell, and we kind of have to tell it. And they told it, and it's such an achievement. I mean, let's talk about some of the other just technical and other merits going on here. I want to start with the music, because I want to make sure I don't forget about it. I bought the soundtrack the day after it came out, or the game came out, because I was at work, and I really wanted to be playing Uncharted, but I couldn't, so I listened to the music.
Right.
And the first 3 games were scored by a guy named Greg Edmondson. I think those scores are fantastic, especially Uncharted 3. Love the score for Uncharted 3. And Nathan Drake's theme is just such a great gaming theme.
Yeah.
But they replaced composers here with Henry Jackman, who is a sort of newish movie composer. Probably most notably right now, he's scored the last 2 Captain America movies, including Civil War, so you've heard his work there. And I've followed his work a little bit. I've heard it on the Captain America movies, some other things. I think he's a good composer. I didn't know he had this in him. I think this is a phenomenal score for a video game, movie, whatever. It's just a great piece of music composition, and it works great within the game, too. There's a lot of great just places where it can loop and be used in the combat that works really well. But, man, the way he uses the Nathan Drake theme and then builds new themes on top of that, the sort of piano theme that he's used for Nate and Elena is just utterly gorgeous. There are so many haunting moments that I remember primarily through the music. It is, I think, one of the all-time great video game scores, and it definitely expands on what they did with The Last of Us, which is where they had Gustavo Santaolalla, who is a very famous movie composer, has won 2 Oscars, that sort of thing, and he scored The Last of Us, and it is both a great game score and this sort of cinematic score. And it was very different. I don't think there's any other game that quite sounds like The Last of Us.
Yeah, it's a very unique kind of score.
And Uncharted 4 kind of continues on that, where it's not just a video game adventure score. Not to say that the other ones were just. I think Greg Edmondson did great work. And who knows what he could have done with Uncharted 4. But Henry Jackman really brought it. I think it's the best thing he's composed. I think it's one of the best scores I've ever heard for just a contained video game experience like this that's not a bigger RPG or something where you hear a lot of the music over and over again. It's incredible.
Yeah, what struck me most about the score is the way that it sort of like reuses the Nathan Drake theme and subverts it in so many places throughout. That is, again, like it's something where the game is so thematically on point throughout, through like all of its plotting, all the subplots, like everything, all the character relationships, and then even the music at sort of like digging into the Nathan Drake character, finding out what makes him tick, and kind of identifying like, hey, you're kind of an asshole most of the time, Nate. Like it's a problem, and the music gets at that too. That it's like when you get that like really stunning opening title sequence,
so good.
That's like with the graphics and everything. The theme there. That's like it starts to build the way that the Nathan Drake theme builds, and then like goes with like the big horn section and everything, and then it sort of like falls away. And it sort of cuts itself off in a way and like becomes darker and like quiet again in the way that like you're so accustomed to hearing that very triumphant music through the last 3 games, and here like they use it so subtly and perfectly, and then especially there's like that almost like kind of like quiet beach version of it that is played during the epilogue section when you're just walking around. That's like they turn that theme that's a good theme and is like, but it's very much like an Indiana Jones style theme. That's just like this very triumphant, like awesome adventure music, and they turn it into something very poignant that says something about the story and the characters, and that to me is like the sign of a really great score.
Absolutely. I mean, again, you make these Indiana Jones comparisons because you have to with Uncharted.
Yeah.
Especially after playing Uncharted 4, boy, do I not need an Indiana Jones 5. That is going to seem so out of time and unnecessary, because there's no way they're going to do for Indiana Jones what Naughty Dog just did for Nathan Drake. And has been doing for Nathan Drake. They've so far surpassed any of the things that they were inspired by. It's just ridiculous. And I do think the music is a big part of that in this game. And if you don't own it, the soundtrack, it's like $10 on iTunes. It's so good. I've listened to the whole thing, just sat to, it's like an 80-minute score. Like 3 times I've just done the whole thing, and it is so good, every minute of it. I'm sure there's some music missing that is in the game, but for what it is for the soundtrack, it's a really good soundtrack.
Cool.
The sound design in the game overall, too.
Yeah, great.
I think that became a more remarkable part of the Uncharted series as it went along, but I would never put Uncharted in the same realm of sound design as like a Halo 4 or something. Uncharted 4 belongs in that realm. It
Absolutely,
is fantastic sound design. The second day I had the game, I went out and bought those PlayStation Gold wireless headphones. I wanted some new wireless headphones, and those are really good. And they have the new Uncharted edition that says Sic Parvis Magna on it.
Oh, cool.
They're really cool. Yeah, especially listening to it through there. They're like the surround headset. Unbelievable. Just the weapon sounds and the environment sounds and the way the dialogue is kind of mixed and moves in the sound field. It sounds really fucking great.
Yeah, like the sound design is definitely really on point, especially like a lot of the weapon sound effects are really, because that was something about, I think Uncharted 1 in particular, like didn't have great weapon sound effects, and Uncharted 2 was a little bit better. It wasn't until Uncharted 3 that I felt like the sound design was really well done, particularly for the combat stuff. Uncharted 4, it's especially, I think the best one is the reloading noise for like the AK-47.
Yeah.
There's something that's like they really capture something that's like it's I don't know. There's something about a lot of those sound effects in the combat that are not only just like they sound really good and are satisfying, but they also convey something about the combat that's like you know when you have finished reloading because the sound effect is so distinctive and comes up through the mix at the perfect level that it's like you're gaining that information sort of auditorily that some games like bury too much in the mix.
Yes, no, fantastic sound design, and then the graphics.
Yeah.
Holy fucking shit. This is the best looking game ever made, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously there are some PC games that will technically look better, but I think in terms of technical prowess combined with art design is the best looking game there is right now.
I mean, there's so many. We haven't even talked about the Madagascar section.
Right.
But when you get there, I mean, the game is plenty good looking up to that point.
Yeah.
But when it opens up and you basically have this giant open map to explore on Madagascar, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, and like the mud and the way that like the mud getting on the car and the Jeep like kicking up the mud and everything.
The colors and the lighting. The color and lighting in this game especially is what blows me away most. And it's like, okay, we've arrived, we're in the next generation. Right. Naughty Dog brought us here kicking and screaming. We're 3 years in, we finally got here. Not that there haven't been great looking games. Yeah. I mean, The Witcher, Arkham Knight, the not coincidentally, I think the two best games of this generation so far, and this would be the other one, tend to have the best graphics, but it's like, I'm so excited by what we can do, and it's why I get really frustrated by this PlayStation Neo bullshit.
Right.
Just let's sit with the hardware we have. Clearly you can do some amazing fucking things.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the one thing to note up front, we did just play the Nathan Drake collection, which pushed everything up to 60 frames per second.
Right, yeah.
That was the original plan for Uncharted 4. It wound up running in 30. Did that bother you at all?
No, not really. Like, I think it's because I think the combat design is so good that it doesn't like it. And the pace of the combat is such that it doesn't need the really high frame rate to work. Like, obviously, if it was ran at 60 frames per second, it would be better. Like, I'm never going to be one of those crazy people that's like, no, like, artistically speaking, I think the 30 frame per second game is better. That's just kind of like...
That's stupid.
That's silly. It's just a silly kind of way to look at it. But I don't think that it being at 30 frames per second particularly detracts from the game, and I really respect that what they did with the multiplayer is the multiplayer runs at 900p and runs at 60 frames per second. So the multiplayer is 60 frames, which is the right choice to make because you want the multiplayer to be as responsive as possible, and at some point it doesn't matter how good the multiplayer looks because you stop seeing the multiplayer when you play enough of it.
Right, and I think you look at the multiplayer and it looks really nice, but I think you see why they made that choice.
Oh yeah, it definitely, like, the single player looks much better.
Looks much better, and it has to because the visual data means more there.
Yeah.
It means more to the story, and you can do more with it. And yeah, I at first it was a little distracting just because I'd played the Nathan Drake collection, and now I'm doing the climbing, and it's slower frame rate, and you notice it. Once you get over that, it doesn't matter. I don't think it impacts the game negatively in any way. Again, yes, would it be better in 60? Sure. Does it hurt the game at all to be in 30? No. And I think that's perfectly fine. This is not a case where, like, if they had not gotten Halo 5 to run at 60, I think that would have hurt Halo 5 because it's so built around that.
Yeah, but that game does not have a lot else to stand on.
No, but this 30 is just fine. And, you know, if the PlayStation Neo version came out, it was 60, that might get me to buy a PlayStation Neo because it's such a good-looking game. Yeah. I kind of doubt that would happen because this is
that'd have to be a tremendous boost in power for it to be able to get what the Uncharted 4 campaign from this game, like, running at 60 frames per second.
Yeah. So, and again, there's no part of the game where I felt like it was designed in such a way that the 30 hurts it.
Yeah, and then also, like, it should be noted that, like, it is a very consistent frame rate. Like, I literally only noticed one part where the frame rate dropped, and it was very understandable, where I was, like, in a weird corner at the bottom of the boat that was filled with water, and there were, like, 5 bodies and a grenade that went off, and, like, if you were standing there and you looked at the ground, the frame rate went to shit. But it was a very specific, weird, isolated area, and the only reason I even remembered that is because it was literally the only time in the entire game, because that was near the end of the game where I was there, that I had seen any frame rate drops at all. And I was like, holy shit, like, it almost made me realize, holy fuck, like, this game has been completely 100% rock steady as far as I could tell on the frame rate.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something we haven't talked about. This game is polished out the wazoo.
Yeah.
Like, this is a testament to why you delay your games, because clearly Naughty Dog had all the time they needed. This game is completely finished. I encountered one weird glitch. It was where there's that scene where that wonderful section where you're going through the caves near the end, and Henry Avery went crazy with the exploding things. Yeah. Anyway, you fall down, and it transitions into this cutscene where you and Elena fall, and then Elena pretends to be dead.
Right, yeah.
When that scene started playing, all the sound went away for me. It was a really weird glitch, and I had to shut the game down completely and restart it, and then it went. But I got so freaked out because it wouldn't just, the sound would cut out and then it would freeze, but it would freeze right around the time when Nate was thinking Elena was dead, and so I kept watching the scene thinking, oh God, did they kill Elena?
Right,
and so while I was waiting for the game to load again, I brought up a plot summary and just scrolled to where, is Elena dead? No, okay. It didn't spoil anything else, but I'm like, I was so freaked out and I was waiting for it to load again. And finally it worked. Because I was kind of wondering, maybe this cutscene just is glitched for me in my save. But I got it to work. But that was the one weird glitch I encountered. Other than that, totally rock solid. The multiplayer is totally rock solid. They got to finish the game. Yeah. How great is that? Yeah. And it was worth the wait. I think a finished Uncharted 4 is much better than a rushed Uncharted 4.
I'm not annoyed that they delayed the game. Like, they clearly needed to. Like, it's like, as you said, like, the game is highly polished in it.
Highly polished, and what it's trying is just so far beyond, frankly, some things anyone has ever tried. I mean, the audacity of that Madagascar map just being plopped in the middle of the game. It's like, we're going to do this for one chapter.
Yeah.
And then you're going to move on. And again, that could be the game for another thing. That is a more interesting open world than anything in Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah, no, definitely than that.
It's smaller, but it's more interesting to me.
Yeah.
And some of the environments in there, I just loved driving around. I've gone back to that chapter just to, like, show it off to my brother because he got home last week, and I'm like, you have to see Uncharted 4. And so I just loaded up Chapter 10, the 12 Towers, and was looking around at it, and it's, oh my God, it's amazing.
And that section is also like a testament to a lot of the game design that we talked like really in depth about the combat because they changed a lot there. But throughout the whole game, like, there is a much greater sense of freedom than in the other Uncharted games, and I talk about this in my review, that there's, like, almost in every single climbing section, there are parts where, like, the path branches just a little bit. It's like, and there's almost a surreal quality to it the first time you encounter it, where I was kept on being like, where does that go? And so I would just, like, go backwards and go up this other path and be like, well, okay, it just wraps back around here, but, like, and it's like I was just so accustomed and taught through the Uncharted games to expect, like, there is one path you climb, and that is it, and you just go, and you go up this series of handholds, and that is the only way to progress through the environment. That is how literally every single climbing sequence has ever been designed in all three of those Uncharted games. And here, basically every single one offers tiny branching paths, but they are branching paths. And then, like, that design philosophy is a lot more notable in, like, the Madagascar sequence or in the sort of tropical island sequence before you go to Libertalia, that are just like these small kind of like quietly open world sequences in a weird way that allow you to just, like, make your way through the environment, and every single direction funnels you through where the mission is because it has to, but it still gives you this sense of freedom and the sense of, like, you know, oh, I could go see what's over there and, like, and have some fun and, like, explore and, like, maybe find a collectible or whatever it is that's over there, or I can, like, keep on going this way. And that, like, small amount of freedom is so refreshing for a franchise that has felt, while it used its constraints very well, it has always felt very constrained to me.
Absolutely. The climbing in this game is so fucking good.
Yeah.
And Naughty Dog has gotten so good at just the subliminal messaging of where you're supposed to climb. Yeah. It's not, like, crazy, like every rock is just painted white. It's more complex than that.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting how those environments are built. Like, I really like the new Tomb Raider games. I think they're very, very good, solid games.
Yeah.
But the difference between them and Uncharted, to me, kind of comes down to the climbing in Tomb Raider is there's giant patches that stick out like a giant sore thumb.
Right.
That's where you climb. Uncharted is, it feels like I can kind of just climb anywhere because the environments are built in such a way and funnel me in such a way that I never really feel constrained.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt that illusion in Uncharted 1, 2, 3, but it's like it's no longer an illusion in Uncharted 4. It feels very real. I mean, this game controls as fluidly and effortlessly as anything I've ever played.
Yeah.
Just the general sense of control is unbelievable. I would have said that about The Last of Us, and this feels like another step up from that.
Yeah, definitely.
So you have all of that. The facial animations we've talked about before, just unbelievable. You get to that scene in Chapter 2 where you see adult Nate for the first time.
Right, yeah.
Close up at least, and it's like, oh boy, they upgraded the character model.
Yeah,
That's incredible. And
it's something where they're able to capture the performer's performance to such a degree that there are a number of moments throughout the game that, like, where in old games you wouldn't be able to do this because you just couldn't animate it properly. But here, it's just like there are moments that are quiet. They convey, like, Elena has a really profound one when you find the Pirates Council thing, where it's like they're talking and like Nate's like talking about like, man, like they're like these like the greatest pirates in history, and they're all here and they're just dead and they never even saw it coming, and you just like have Elena in the background and her face reacting to it, and then Nate looks in like recognizes her look, and it's like this very quiet, powerful, important story moment between these two characters that is conveyed entirely through the visuals, which again, like especially when you like see like the Crash Bandicoot part like at the beginning and the end of the game, it like really makes you remark at how far games have come in being able to convey something like that just through the visuals, where before it was like you relied so much heavily on the technology that when the technology wasn't there, that like, you know, in the original Halo you could never hope to do that because all the characters' facial animation was like what the jaw moving up and down, and that was the extent of it. It's like Uncharted 4, it's like there are profound character moments, like some of the most important character moments in the game that are not telegraphed by dialogue whatsoever.
I have never seen character animation this good on human models ever. Not even in this league. And I include every CGI movie ever made in that.
Yeah.
We can talk all we want and suck James Cameron's dick for Avatar and how amazing that is. I don't want to suck
James Cameron's dick for Avatar. It's not worth it.
And just how amazing No, they don't have anything on the character animation in Uncharted 4. The level of nuance and just believability in that is intense. And it's not always that Uncharted 4 goes for photorealism. I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't, definitely not.
Madagascar is not photorealistic Madagascar, and that's part of why it looks as good as it does.
Yeah.
But when they do want to go through for those things like the carpet, like you talked about, or the paperback books, it is uncanny, but in the best way, and the character models have so far surpassed the Uncanny Valley thing. Yeah. They've like leapfrogged it and come back around, and it's perfect. And boy, I don't know how we get better from here, but clearly we're going to.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. I mean, if this is Naughty Dog's first game on the PS4, well, their first game on the PS3 was Uncharted 1. Yeah. Their last game on the PS3 was The Last of Us. Where will they be by the end of the PS4?
Yeah, geez, like I don't even
know what the room to improve is, but I honestly wouldn't have. Uncharted 1 is still an amazing looking game.
Yeah.
So these are such interesting degrees of relativity to talk about here. So other standout sequences to talk about. I do want to talk a little bit about the big action set piece of the game, which is the car chase.
Okay, yeah.
I praised that extensively at the E3 demo when they did that, and that was before I'd ever played an Uncharted game. But I said, that is one of the best choreographed action sequences I have ever seen, and I stand by that in the finished game because the E3 demo went up to the point where he's on the rope and he's hanging, but then he gets up on the trucks, and then you're jumping across the trucks, and then there's a fucking tank you're fighting. It's insane how much stuff happens in that sequence.
Yeah, it's just like it is. I think it's the phases. There's a pace to that sequence where it's like things escalate. Because even just like driving down that hill while you're being chased by the APC, that's at the beginning of the E3 demo. Like that part's really exhilarating, and then you get into like jumping off and grappling to the thing, and then you're getting dragged behind in the mud, and then you're hopping from car to car, and then you're on the back of the motorcycle. Like it's a long, extended sequence where it's like feels like there are not a lot of those big set piece moments. Again, there's like the tower collapses later in the game that like that when you're inside of it, that moment is also very spectacular. But it does feel like they've like stuffed a lot of their big action set piece stuff like right into that like one.
And it's great. We haven't even talked about the fact that you can drive. I mean, that alone.
Yeah.
When you get, I did not know. Like in the E3 demo, I was actually wondering: are you driving or is it like scripted? And so I didn't know that, and I didn't watch a lot of trailers for this. I don't follow a lot of pre-release stuff for games. Yeah. So in the first moment when you get in a Jeep and you're allowed to drive in this game, I was kind of blown away because in every other Uncharted, you go up to a car and I'm wondering, is this when we finally get to drive in an Uncharted game? And you never do in the first 3 games. The closest is you have the little ski boats.
The jet skis. Uncharted 1.
But you never get to drive, and in this one you finally get to drive, and you get to be the centerpiece of a major action moment doing that. And it's great. I've never really played a car chase in a game like that to that level. It's incredible. So I loved that moment. All that stuff in the caves at the end felt like you're in the greatest amusement park ever. I just loved that. It felt like you were in Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, but done fantastically.
Yeah.
Not that it's not done fantastically at the amusement park, it is, but this is just something else. So many standout moments in this game. I mean, it does feel like it does so much of what I love in the other Uncharted games, and then a lot more. It feels like it opens up new emotional and thematic and narrative dimensions while also giving you some of the things you want, even if it's not the same level or quantity of that. Quality is still there.
Yeah, definitely.
What other things would you say about just standout sequences? And
I mean,
elements?
not even just sequences, but I feel like it's crazy that we have not talked about how fucking awesome the pirate treasure plot is in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's man, because that's the thing that when you get to Libertalia and that plot really starts rolling, it's amazing. It's a great mystery story.
It is.
About Henry Avery and constructing this pirate utopia and using it to steal everyone's gold, and you walking through these steps and going to, because it's such a massive island and you go through all these phases where you hear about these places that you're going to go, or you're exploring where the blacksmith and the tavern is with Sam, and you're both remarking on what's happening and speculating about well, where did everyone go? There are no bodies in this town. And then you find, there's, this massive battle in front of this manor. And, walking through this mystery and discovering, what happened to this pirate colony was, the greatest fucking scheme in the history of pirates that was lost on this island where Henry Avery got all these other famous pirate captains together and all their crew and all their treasure and piled it together to make, a pirate colony. But they actually just used that as a scheme to take all the treasure for themselves, and they didn't give a shit about the pirate colony at all in the first place. That's such an amazing story to walk through and to see all the backstabbing, especially when you get to all the manors.
And that's the key, is the mystery element of it. Is that they don't just tell you the story, it's that over the course of this long game, you get to sort of experience it as Nate is, and every time you find another clue, you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And you want to know more. It is just a great, almost detective fiction story.
Yeah, it is just, and then it all peaks to me when you get to that just incredible scene where you walk in at the Pirate Council, where all the pirates, except for 2, have died in their chairs from being poisoned, and then Nate and Elena have the conversation there. And it's because you had just been going through all their houses and finding notes and other skeletons with cutlasses run through them and all this stuff talking about damn you, Avery, you're not going to get my treasure through my cold dead hands and all this stuff, and you get to see all the intrigue that was happening from all these other pirate captains. And then you just see all of their bodies assembled together with their pirate regalia and all this shit. It's just a beautifully created set almost that you just get to walk around and it really delivers the gravitas, because you feel you've come to know a little bit about these pirate characters by playing through it up to that point. That it's when you get there, you're oh, holy shit! This is where all of these great pirates have died, right here. Yep. And that's what that story moment is. That's how they remark about it.
I mean, this is something we haven't talked about either, that this is skeleton-wise the same story as every other Uncharted game.
Yeah.
Which is that Nate goes looking for a treasure, winds up finding a lost city. Yeah. I love that we are 4 for 4. Every single Uncharted game ends with you finding a lost city. I don't think there are literally that many lost cities in the world for people to find.
No.
It's incredible. But it never feels like they're retreading dead territory.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's amazing that none of the Uncharted games feel that way to me. I don't think any of 1, 2, or 3 feel repetitive. They keep it fresh. This one keeps it even fresher because it's just a really, really well-told version of that basic archetypal Uncharted plot.
Yeah, and then even beyond that, this is what I said in my review, is that it's something about the Indiana Jones movies and all the these adventure style stories, is that those plots are always just sort of there, and the story about the Ark of the Covenant, or the story about the Temple of Doom, the story about getting the Holy Grail in the Indiana Jones movies are fine, and they're just sort of there, and it's they're fun little excuses to go on these adventures, but it's not you're there for the little character beats and the little bits of humor and the cool action and all of that, and the sense of adventure. That's what you're there for, and the plots just exist to facilitate that, and Uncharted 1, 2, and 3 very much follow in that model, that it's I like all the stuff about Shambhala, and there's some interesting story stuff about Marco Polo and all of that, and that's fine, but it's mostly there to just facilitate the character interactions and Nate's journey through all these adventures. It's it's there and it's serviceable. And Uncharted, and I had just come to accept by the time we got to Uncharted 4 that that's just what this genre is, and that if I'm interested more in the ancient city plot lines and all that stuff, and really want that to be done well and make it very interesting, that just was not the genre that is capable of exploring it. And then Uncharted 4 just sort of calmly walks in the room and just fucking plops this down, and holy shit, man. Like, you just did what nothing else in this entire genre that I've experienced, at least, has ever managed to do, which is to make the mystery of the treasure and all of that to be like a really compelling story that stands on its own, that then also isn't so strong in terms of how it reflects on the characters and all of that. Like, it still has that quality to it, but it is its own involving and invested mystery in its own right, and that just makes everything so much better. And what makes the pacing when you get to that second half like so tight and so fascinating, and one of the reasons why I feel like in retrospect some of the pacing in like the Scotland area and stuff feels a little slow, is that at the last half of Uncharted 4 where that mystery really starts going, is that the game has so much that it can do, that it can move from an action sequence to a character beat to some platforming to another step in the mystery to another action sequence to like another character, and like it can just move to, it has all these tools at its disposal, and it executes on them all so masterfully that that's what makes like that back half of Uncharted 4 so insanely just such a masterpiece. Like, it's so remarkable that it's able to juggle all these narrative beats and all these gameplay mechanics and feel like it doesn't mess it up even once at that point.
No. All right, I think that's a pretty good way to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts for Uncharted 4 to close this out?
It's a great fucking game, and I'm really, really fascinated by whatever it is that Naughty Dog is going to do next, because I hope it's not Last of Us 2, but maybe. Originally, I wasn't even looking forward to Uncharted 4. Like, when they first announced it, like, I thought it was a dopey idea that was like, they don't need to do another Uncharted 4. Uncharted 3 was fine, and I wasn't super hot on that franchise. I enjoyed it. But then they started talking about the long-lost brother, and I'm like, that sounds hokey. And then getting closer to release, I got a little more excited by it, and then clearly, like, whether we saw it or not, like, Uncharted 4 was a game that needed to happen. And so maybe The Last of Us 2 is what they do next, and maybe they have this incredible idea for it. Or maybe, like, they move on to a next IP, but I feel like...
Well, I trust them implicitly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Whatever they do, I am right now, I just talked at the top of the show that I'm working on some new top 10 lists. One of the things I kind of want to do is I want to revisit my top 10 movies and games lists that I've done before, because I did the movies one particularly like right as I was starting film school, and that list would be 100% different basically now. And games, I didn't have Persona 3 on that one. Like, there's just things that I have to shake that up, because I've
because we did that podcast like right after The Last of Us came out, because I remember like being very troubled about how to place Last of Us on that list, because it was like a week old.
Yeah, and I had it on there, but I've been thinking deeply about that list, and I honestly, if I were to be honest with myself, Uncharted 4 would have to be on there for me, I think, because it would replace The Last of Us if I were to have that on there, because I think this is an even better game than that. And it is, as you said when I started playing Uncharted, this series is so
it's made for you, yeah.
And this is so completely the best version of it. And it combines so many things I just love in games and in life, and it blows me away so much. And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, fuck, why does this have to come out right now as I'm trying to remake this list? Because now I'm in that same problem you were with Last of Us. It's like, do I include it or not? It's a week old. Well, I don't know. But if I'm being honest, I probably should put it on there.
Right.
Because this is an all-timer. I think this is the high watermark of this generation so far. I think it is one of the high watermarks in this genre in gaming. I feel like we are in a very special moment in this generation, where we're getting stuff like Arkham Knight and Witcher 3 and Last of Us, Uncharted 4, and the hits are just coming pretty rapidly at this point. Yeah. And this year has already been fantastic. I mean, I talked about before, what could top Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth? And for me, Uncharted 4 did that, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it, because I really love Digimon, and I probably liked it more than Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, although they're tough games to compare. But man, we have Uncharted 4, and we are by no means done with this year. There is so much left to come, and so many things I'm excited to play. Pretty happy about the state of things right now.
Yeah, man. I was not expecting Uncharted 4 to be as good as it is. Although I will say, I don't think I would quite say, in my opinion, that it's better than The Last of Us. Like, those are two very hard games to reckon. Like,
and I understand, and I would personally, but I can totally see the argument for either one.
Yeah, but it's like, man, like either way, Uncharted 4 is really good. It's really, really good.
That is a conversation you can have. I think it's amazing considering what a landmark The Last of Us was.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think it's at least a conversation worth having. Not that one needs to be better than the other. This is just like personal preference, honestly. Yeah. They are 2 A+, 10 out of 10, or perfect all-time games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so very happy. Uncharted 4 is great. We'll see what we'll talk about next week. You can follow me on Twitter at Jonathan Lack.
Sean, you can follow me on Twitter at Sean the Chapman.
We can do this we're not going to do this every week or anything.
No, but follow, subscribe, tumble me, and tweet at it, dig it, just motherfucker.
Because you have it this week, I thought we would do that.
Can you dig it? Yes, you can, motherfucker.